Hello, a very good morning to you. It's just after 6 o'clock on Sunday, January the 12th. And guess what? It is freezing cold outside. So if I was you, I would stay in bed and continue to watch and to listen to talkTV. But as you would expect, I have great news for you. It's Work Harder Day today, a day which is meant to motivate us to push ourselves a little further, whether it's in a personal goal, professional ambition, or a creative project. Very good. Also, today is Kiss a Ginger Day. What? Yes, it's a day to show love and appreciation for redheads around the world. I'm not even sure you can say that anymore. Also, happy birthday to Jeff Bezos. He is the second richest person in the world after Elon Musk, and he turns a very youthful 61 today, so very happy birthday to you. Right, let's start today's show, shall we?
Today's fascinating facts.
So today's fascinating facts. On this day in 1510, Henry VIII, who was just 18 years old on this particular year, appeared incognito in a jousting tournament at Richmond Park and was applauded for his jousting before he revealed his true identity. On this day in 1954, the Queen opened New Zealand's Parliament, the first time in the country's history that a reigning monarch had done so. And on this day in 1970, the Boeing 747 completed its first transatlantic flight from New York to Heathrow. It is still referred to by many people, including myself, by its original nickname, of course, being the Jumbo Jet. The 747 was the first wide-body aircraft ever produced. It held the passenger capacity record of 660 in a single-class layout for 37 years, until October 2007, when the Airbus A380 took to the skies with a maximum passenger capacity of 850. And those are today's fascinating facts. Well, I'm delighted to be joined this morning by Fred Perry, known also as Raj Prasad, consultant psychiatrist and broadcaster. Good morning.
Good morning. I can explain.
Good morning, Fred.
Yeah, I am going to go and play tennis later. Right. I know you just mentioned something about the weather, which I thought was a bit disturbing.
Well, it's freezing. It's utterly freezing. And when my car arrived this morning to bring me to the studio, the gentleman who was driving then decided to go and de-ice the windscreen. I was like, I have to go. We haven't really got time, but it is pretty cold out there.
Well, I'll be playing indoors. You'll be relieved to hear.
Very good, very good.
I understand you used to play tennis.
I did, actually. I played all the tournaments when I was a youngster. My brother and sister, extremely good at tennis. I think I was all right. I ended up playing a really good chap called Uli Nganga, who went on to become some sort of championship player, and I got wiped off the court.
Okay, but why did you stop playing? You know, as a doctor, you must be prescribing physical activity.
No,
right?
Absolutely, and certainly when I was at med school, I played for the first team at med school.
Wow, you were very good then.
Well, I was quite good at that time, but then it all sort of, now we've got serious classes on. It just all stopped, really. I think doing house jobs and everything, it just...
We must have a game, I think.
We must.
We're not competitive or anything.
As long as it's inside at the moment. No, we're not competitive at all. Now, I've been looking at the rich list.
Okay, am I on there?
You are. You're number 17. You're above Alice Walton. Elon Musk has got $416 billion. Jeff Bezos, $233 billion. Mark Zuckerberg, $212 billion. It's interesting, actually. The top four, all United States. Then France comes in at number 5 with Bernard Arnault and family, who owns Louis Vuitton.
Well, I do see the occasional high net worth client. And what's really interesting is to think about what does the money mean to people once you get beyond, let's say, 100 billion? Why do they keep... Because they're very driven. We're talking about Motivation Day. So what does the money mean? What can you buy with 360 billion, which is one of the estimates about Elon Musk's worth, that you couldn't buy with just like 1 billion? So what does it represent? And I think it represents a scorekeeper. The amount of money you have is a scorekeeper to who's the best at anything that they're doing. So that's why they still remain competitive.
Well, don't you think you look at yourself and your colleagues to see who is doing the best? And it must be very interesting at those dinner parties, sort of saying, well, how much are you worth? Well, I'm actually only worth 400 billion. I mean, how embarrassing.
Yeah, but the other thing, of course, is about the power of comparison. You see, once you reach the top 10, you're comparing yourself with the other 10 rather than people further down the list. So oddly enough, people who are worth 100 billion can end up feeling rather poor, depending on who you compare yourself with.
Well, that's true. true. I mean, if you look at this poor Amancio Ortega, who is Spanish, he owns Zara. I mean, he comes in a piddling 116 billion. I mean, that's embarrassing.
Because I thought he was the world's wealthiest man at one point, actually.
He may well have been, but obviously this is a very dynamic chart. But anyway, I'd like to know how I get up to the top of that chart. Shall we move on and talk about what's going on in the papers? I'd be fascinated in the psychology of what's going on here. Rachel Reeves back in the headlines this morning, of course. Really bad idea, I think, to go to China and to talk about how the UK is going to do business with China at a time when the economy is tanking, the pound is in free fall, the markets have no confidence in the Chancellor. And this morning, the headline is Reeves to wage war on waste as Labour critics circle. I'm fascinated at this because obviously she's trying to get on the front foot saying, OK, in terms of the spending review, we may have to have one, but I'm going to have to cut the public service waste, which many people have advised her to do. The thing that I find fascinating is there is mounting economic pressure on her, but also support for the Chancellor evaporating amongst her supporters, people privately calling for her to resign. When's the tipping point, do you think, for other members of Parliament who realise their seats are in tricky sort of circumstances? When does that psychology start to play?
Well, one of the problems here is that we've seen that Labour in opposition were very, very good at criticising the government.
Very good.
And what we've discovered is that now they're in government, in terms of responding to criticism, they're not very good. They're not very good at coming up with ideas that would rebut the criticism. So she's been criticised for being in China. You'd have thought that a creative PR person could come up with some rebuttal about how being in China might actually help the British economy.
Well,
but
they've tried that.
They've not done very well on that.
No, they haven't. And of course, I think what people are saying is the support for her has evaporated. Even those people who said, right, they support her in the first instance, they're all now starting to change their minds. I wonder how long she's got, actually.
Well, the tipping point is also arrived at by the competition. Who's the competitive rival? Who throws their hat in the ring?
But how much of this is also the herd? So it takes one person to put their head above the parapet, and actually when you then get an amalgamation of many people saying exactly the same, that must become the tipping point.
But also they want an alternative candidate.
Yeah.
It's all very well for saying we don't want this lady to run the Treasury, but who's the alternative candidate? Once someone puts their head above the parapet on that front, then you'll reach the tipping point, I think. Well,
the question I have for you this morning, how much pressure do you think Rachel Reeves is actually under from her own party? Also, I'd like to know, how long has she got in the job? Let me know. 0344 499 1000. Those calls charged at the national rate. You can also text the word talk in your message to 87222. You can message us on X as well at talkTV. How long has she got?
A year.
That long? Do you think it's that long?
Yeah, well, I think that Starmer isn't necessarily showing himself to be someone who's very adept and quick on his feet in terms of coming up with alternative plans. But I think she's got about a year.
I mean, as I've said, just in terms of the priorities of those policies, when you attack the winter fuel allowance, when you attack the farmers, and then you've got Morrison's this morning actually saying they're on the side of the farmers, that is a very bad look for any government at all. Then you attack the private schools. You've seen another private school closing this week. All of this adds up, and people are starting to say, and that's why I said the markets also seem not to have the confidence in the government.
But it takes about a year for any changes to feed through into the economy in terms of growth. If we get some figures that show the economy is growing, then she'll be saved. And it'll take about a year, I think, before we see that. And if we don't see any economic growth, because they don't seem to have actually any great ideas on that front, then she's in real trouble. That's what she's hinged her star to, that idea of economic growth.
It's interesting, the front page of the Sunday Times this morning. This is a really complicated story. This is about Tulip Siddiq. This is the leader of Bangladesh, says the anti-corruption minister and her family should return properties if they're found to have given to them through an ex-regime robbery. So, whilst I don't want to go into the detail of this, it is complicated. Tulip Siddiq, of course, another headache for Keir Starmer, I think.
Hasn't this person referred themselves to...
Yes, they have. Yeah.
Right, so that we'll have to wait and see what the outcome is of that. But again, we're seeing a government that seems to be stumbling every other day with a new problem.
Absolutely. And Siddiq is the niece of Sheikh Hasina, the daughter of the country's founding father and its prime minister, until her removal in an uprising last year. Hasina resigned after a massacre when police responded to student protests by killing hundreds of people. But she and her family, I mean, it seems incredibly murky. Whether or not she has done something wrong, it does make the public look at the Labour government government because they promised this new era of, I suppose, sleaze-free government. And the optics of this are, here we go again, another government mired in scandal, and so early.
And also, don't forget the fact that Starmer came in and then we discovered his glasses and his suits and stuff were gifts. And so that's what was a very bad start in terms of setting the tone. Because all these things reinforce an idea that actually they're not really socialist in the old-fashioned Labour sense of the idea, which is they're really for poor people, but they're really trying to line their own pockets, which is an unfortunate thing we're thinking about with politicians. Are they in politics to change the world, or are they in politics to get a future directorship?
Actually, on that note, and I will just bring this up here, the Mirror front page this morning, 9 jobs Nigel. Nigel Farage apparently juggles 8 part-time jobs on top of being an MP. He's earned him $571,585 in less than 6 months. He's flogging tax-free gold bullion, meaning his £91,346 salary as an MP for Clacton in Essex makes him the worst paid job. So the Mirror obviously having a go at Nigel Farage. It got me thinking, do you think MPs should have a second job or multiple jobs? Should they have a primary job, which is to serve their constituents?
Well, it's a good argument. I mean, the argument about why they're allowed to have other jobs is it plugs them into the economy and the real world, right? But the other thing you've got to worry about with Farage and all these other jobs is to what extent might he be influenced by the amount he's being paid elsewhere to actually look after the interests of his constituents when they come into conflict. There's a conflict of interest, some people would begin to say.
I think one of the other things that's being levelled at him and the accusations are that his constituency of Clacton is a very poor constituency and people don't have the money that many other parts of the country have. In fact, the think tank Onward found Clacton ranks amongst the top 1% of deprived neighbourhoods. Jaywick Sands, which is next door, is the most deprived neighbourhood in England. So when you juxtapose that, the poorest place in England with Nigel Farage's earnings, and of course he's meant to represent the people of Clacton, and I think for some people, many people, that is jarring.
Yes, because the question would be, to what extent does he really understand what life is like in his constituency? I think famously a few years ago Rishi Sunak was asked about the price of bread and he couldn't answer the question. It turned out he'd never done any shopping himself,
and of course that's a classic one, isn't it, to ask how much a pint of milk is. I think David Cameron got asked the same question.
Well, now they're brief, right?
Yes, this is how much a pint of milk.
They give it a list.
Yes, I'm sure they are. Shall we talk about something medical as well? Oh, by the way, just on that note, do you think that MPs should have second, third, fourth, fifth jobs? Should they stick to one job, which is the job to represent their constituents in Parliament? The number again, 0344 499 1000. Those calls charged at the national rate.
Can I just make one other quick point about jobs? Which is that whatever we think about Farage, he clearly is a talented man.
Very.
But so many other people want to employ him. So that's a signal. Having lots of other jobs is a signal that maybe you're actually a pretty competent person. Well, but maybe you should restrict that competency to looking after
Well, to be fair to Nigel Farage, he says, well, I do work 22 hours a day. I mean, I've obviously spent time with him. He works very, very hard. He seems to have no sleep whatsoever. And so he says that he's doing this in his time off and he still is managing to service his constituency. That's his rebuttal.
Yeah, well, but, I mean, at what point, 10 jobs, 15 jobs? At what point does it... What's the tipping point for too many jobs?
What's the tipping point? And then he wants to be on the rich list, doesn't he? And therefore, he can then compare his salary with Elon Musk, for example. This is a big story this morning, if you are just waking up. Corridor care nurses to ease the NHS bed crisis. A hospital is recruiting nurses to work 12-hour shifts in corridors, caring for sick patients who are waiting for a bed. This is a hospital I've worked in, the Whittington.
So have I.
You worked there as well?
I was a medical student there.
Right. I did... What did I do there? I think
you look slightly just shocked.
No, I am slightly. I mean, let's just say I remember the Whittington very well. It's an archway in London, and certainly at the time I was there, and probably the time you were there, it lacks certain infrastructure.
You could say that again.
Well, I'm being polite.
It was like working in an old satanic mill.
It was.
I mean, use a William Blake analogy. Yeah.
But I mean, it really was a Victorian building, wasn't it? And it was all patched together with bits of sellotape and so on. Anyway, the story this morning is that essentially the Whittington is advertising for nurses to give corridor care, what is being called corridor RNs. So the trusts around the country are, because the waiting lists are so high, they're installing power sockets in the corridors. You've seen all the trolleys lining up in the corridors. corridors. They're administering care. They're now advertising for nurses to work on those corridors. I mean, this is totally unacceptable. And lots of very notable people this morning, like Professor Nicola Ranger, head of the Royal College of Nursing, said recruiting tired nurses to do extra shifts solely in corridors is desperate. It shows how normalised this practice has become. I would agree.
Well, in their defence, the hospital management would say that this is a crisis emergency measure. The trouble is, it starts off as a crisis emergency measure, which they shouldn't have to do, then it becomes institutionalised, becomes part of everyday care. Soon we'll be expecting patients to be looked after in corridors as a routine part of the NHS. It's a slippery slope, sliding into worse and worse care that we just accept, because it's free, apparently.
It's free at the point of need. But just in terms of that, there is no capacity in the NHS. You and I have spoken about that. They have cut the numbers of bed. It's running at 99% occupancy. Even the best hotels in the world will never run at 99% occupancy because you can't do it. It is actually physically impossible so to do. Now, I thought that this was a peculiarity to the United Kingdom until I was in LA in a hospital a few Christmases ago. They had exactly the same problem under a privatised healthcare system. So this shows the burden of healthcare, and the fact is you've got increasing numbers of elderly people who you cannot move. There are bed blockers, you can't get them anywhere. We don't have any social care, and round we go.
Yes, the difference with the American system, which obviously has its flaws, I worked in America for a while as a psychiatrist, is that the difference is that the theory being, because it's a more private system, the patients have more power because they have money, and the money follows the patient, so they have choice. I believe that the radical reform the NHS needs, because they're just tinkering at the edges, they're coming up with things like we're going to produce a new app and stuff like this, is we should divide the health budget, which is several, I think approaching 200 billion.
200 billion.
Yes, by every citizen in the UK, and you get, we could call them health vouchers, or the money's ring-fenced, and you get that money that you get to spend on healthcare. And do you know what the number would be if we divided the health budget by every citizen? How much you'd get in your pocket to spend on healthcare every year?
A few thousand.
About £3,000.
Which isn't very much.
Yes, but if you're a family of four, that's £12,000.
True.
And if you don't spend it, you get to save it, roll it over. Gradually, it accumulates.
Now,
my question is, do you think you spent £3,000 on healthcare last year? Because if you didn't, someone spent your money on someone else.
But that's also a vestige of my age and the fact that I look after myself and go to the gym. You also have people with chronic conditions, and they will say, right, for example, if you have Crohn's disease, let's just take that as an example, and you need increasing treatment and you have to be hospitalised, through no fault of your own, you will spend more money than someone like me who doesn't have that.
Very good rejoinder. You could take the £3,000 and you could buy insurance with it, perhaps. You see, that's one way you could handle that, I think. But look, people always say to me when I suggest this idea that we divide the health budget, give people their own health budget, they say, but what happens when you run out of money? Well, my point is I haven't changed the size of the pie. I've just divided it differently. The health service runs out of money now. I think that if you get your own health budget, you get to take responsibility for it. And basically, one of the things with the health service is your money is being spent on other people. So it runs out when you turn up the casualty.
And if you had your individualised health budget, would that change the way that people eat, shop?
Exactly, because
obesity?
You would realise the implications and you'll take more responsibilities. It would change behaviour, which is another key thing. The other thing is your whole street could pool its healthcare budget, right? And therefore people could form their own little health maintenance organisations, which is what they're called in America, and begin to take responsibility for looking after their own health.
But my rebuttal to that will be there are streets in Britain which are much poorer than others, and of course we know they have worse health outcomes. So therefore it would be prejudicial against those streets.
Well, again, you say that, but I come back to my point that the pie hasn't changed. It runs out of money anyway. Here's the other thing.
But some people have much more pie than others.
Yes, OK, but suppose you hadn't spent your health budget over many years and you were sitting on a...
then you get more pie.
Yeah, a lot of pie.
Yeah.
You could choose to donate a bit of your pie to people who you thought were struggling. So you could have that kind of Kickstarter type thing. You know?
I mean, it's a fascinating conversation. What is clear is that the current funding system doesn't work.
Yes.
And we all know that. Yeah. But politically, and I will actually liken this to the poll tax, the community charge, which actually in many ways was much fairer. You were paying per person for the services that you enjoyed. Politically, it was impossible to get it through and cause the downfall of Margaret Thatcher. This would also be politically impossible to get through, because if you start talking about pies and that you are given a standardised, individualised health budget, I think that would be very hard to get through because of the way that politics works.
I agree, but why not run a pilot scheme? Pick one city and run a pilot scheme for a year. See what happens. So people get to see the difference. What's wrong with that?
Well, I don't think anything's wrong. Let me know your thoughts on Raj's pie scheme this morning at 3444991000. Text the word talk in your message to 87222. You can message us on X as well at talkTV. After the break, we'll go through more of this morning's front pages and all the headlines, of course, with Raj. Don't go anywhere. This is Weekend Breakfast. Good morning.
£1,000 a year, he's 70 years old, 70 times 3 ends up to about £210,000 is what he would have had to spend on healthcare, which is a much bigger number, right? First point. Second point I would say is the quality of care that people are getting is very poor because it's a Soviet-style, centrally planned, top-down system, okay? We know that the free market with its competition tends to improve quality. So I believe that the system where every person gets their own health budget, therefore has power and choice, they can take their money and decide what to do, choose doctors, and that competition will improve the quality. But ultimately, for people, let's say, who are running out of money, you could have a special panel, a separate budget of extra money top-up for people who have chronic conditions. Yeah, that you apply to for chronic conditions. So I think there's a way around it. But ultimately, people may criticise my system, but the current system doesn't work.
No, I would agree with that. And actually, I welcome any conversation about how we increase the funding or how we change the funding model, because it simply doesn't work.
And people with prostate cancer and diabetes are getting very poor care at the moment.
They are.
So,
and also, it's very dependent on where you live, the postcode lottery of treatment as well. I know that from my own father's experience as well with prostate cancer.
So the £3,000 a year point, right, because people focus on that, you have to add up...
per year, that's really interesting.
A family of 4 times 3 is £12,000 a year, right?
Yeah.
If you didn't spend much of it over the last 10 years...
120.
Yeah. So that's a lot of money. A lot of money is being spent on healthcare in this country, and a lot of it is being wasted.
I think one of the other things it does is actually will make sure that you remove the waste from the system that we're currently seeing, the way that procurement happens. So the patient is then in control, the money then follows the patient, and therefore the services are responsive to the patient, which is not what is happening at the moment.
And also, I mean, I work in Harley Street. If you go up and down Harley Street, you don't see that massive bureaucratic structure that you get in the NHS. So it would eliminate all of that, and people could take their money and they could come to Harley Street, let's say. It gives them power. Give people back the power to choose, is what I say.
Very good. Let me just bring you this news story. A former Labour Member of Parliament has been arrested during a paedophile sting just months after he was suspended from the party over serious allegations. A video shared on social media shows a man who identifies himself as the former Labour MP Ivor Kaplan before being handcuffed by police officers. Now, Sussex police have confirmed they've arrested a 66-year-old man on suspicion of engaging in sexual communication with a child. Ivor Kaplan, the former Hove Member of Parliament who represented the constituency between 1997 and 2005, was suspended from the Labour Party over serious allegations. The police have said this morning, a police spokesman said, "We are aware of footage circulating, a video circulating on social media, showing a man in Brighton being detained on suspicion of engaging in sexual communication with a child. Officers can confirm that a local 66-year-old man was arrested on Saturday, January the 11th, and currently remains in custody." I'll leave that there. Let's talk about this story, the front page of the Mail. Musk and Cummings in a plot to sabotage UK politics. Apparently, Musk has teamed up with Dominic Cummings, and he is behind all of these attacks on Starmer and various other politicians, Nigel Farage, for example, and they cite the reason for this is the timing of the tweets. So the tweets are going out when Musk would have been asleep, so therefore they're pointing the finger at Dominic Cummings. But I would also argue you can time your tweets.
Well, yes. Also, why is Musk so interested in the UK?
I don't know.
I mean, he's worth more than we are put together.
Well, the whole country.
Yeah, that's right. So I don't understand why he's so... And if he is so interested in us, maybe we can use that to our advantage at some level.
And also, of course...
invite him to come over.
But don't forget, he's also head of DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency. So you would have thought he's got a few things to do over there when Trump comes into power in 8 days' time.
Yeah, and he tweets like 250 times a week. So we do wonder, and he's got these 3 big companies, Tesla and the space thing.
SpaceX.
And the Starlink thing.
The space thing.
The space thing.
You can't just write it off. The space thing.
But it's phenomenal, isn't it?
It is phenomenal.
Why is he tweeting so much when he's got all these other businesses to run?
I mean, also, Nigel Farage says that... I thought Nigel's rebuttal was pretty good towards him, saying, well, obviously, we don't see eye to eye on this particular matter. Apparently, they've patched things up, and that Elon Musk has said that, well, maybe I got that wrong. I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? But it also begs much bigger questions about the power of rich people.
Yes, and also foreign influence. We're meant to be against Russians influencing our elections. Why are we not sort of upset in a similar way for Americans like Elon Musk to be influencing British politics? It's foreign interference with our politics, isn't it?
But also you have to then look at Labour saying their suspicions about Musk and Cummings coming together. And not only that, but the timing of that, but also the use of terminology such as two-tier care, which would not actually be American parlance. Now, you then have to say, well, how much of this is actually Labour trying to get onto the front foot? And we've seen that with Rachel Reeves, desperate to get onto the front foot, because, of course, the news agenda is running down a hill without her.
Yeah, absolutely. But going back to Elon Musk, it's interesting that we're fascinated by his interest in Britain. He's a very, very powerful man, and he could actually, with a single writing of a cheque, change British politics if he backed a particular party, because we have so little money in comparison to him. So it's amazing the power he might have. He could determine who runs Britain.
But not just Britain, the rest of Europe as well. And, of course, all of these European countries desperate to get into bed with him to say that he's an ally of theirs. And, again, you're right. You know, what does it say about a very rich man who can essentially control global politics?
But on the other hand, given Trump wants to take Greenland, Panama and Canada, maybe Elon Musk, even though he does appear somewhat eccentric, could be, oddly enough, in this strange psychiatric clinic, which is the White House, be a balancing a sane voice, maybe.
So if you were a fly on the wall as a psychiatrist in there with Donald Trump and Elon Musk, what would your thoughts be about these two? I mean, they've both got huge egos. They're both very driven, obviously both done extremely well. Is there a power struggle going on?
Well, obviously, as a psychiatrist, I've been doing a form of marital therapy with Musk and Trump, because basically both are, many people would say, narcissists. A narcissist can only have one narcissist in the room. So we're doing basically a countdown to when they fall out. It's inevitable they're going to fall out. They fall out with everyone anyway, so they're going to fall out with each other.
So is that what happened with Nigel Farage?
Yes, I think sooner or later these people fall out with each other because they, by definition, it's my way or the highway. How dare you have a different point of view to me? The other thing with narcissists that people don't realise is they get very, very angry if you disagree with them. It's called narcissistic rage.
Right.
How can it possibly be the case that I'm second?
Because I'm always right.
Yeah, but also, how can it be that the car was 5 minutes late to pick me up? Why am I not been upgraded to first class? They're angry with the world all the time because it's not given them the attention and comfort. Why are you laughing at me?
I was just thinking that you and I cannot be in the same room, obviously, with our narcissistic tendencies.
That's right.
Yes, exactly. So
I'm going to broadcast from another room.
I'm going to fight you in the outbreak. Raj, thanks ever so much for the morning. Good morning, David. Talking about, actually, these corridor RNs. This is Martin in Cambridgeshire. I just wanted to say I'm waiting for the car park nurse jobs to be advertised. Have a fantastic day, everybody. Diane, good morning to you. Diane in Hull, good morning. Great show as ever. I'm not sure if I've missed something, but I do love Raj's new look. I'm not sure I've missed something as well. I'm really not clear why you've turned up like a 1930s Fred Perry. I know, but who plays tennis like that?
Well, this is the way I play tennis. Like a 1930s country house. I'm going to a country house. That's the idea.
Is it all lobs?
It's funny you should say that.
I bet it is.
It's funny you should say that. People are very irritated by my lobbing.
I can just tell. You look like a lobber. Right. Let's move on. So those two questions this morning. How much pressure do you think Rachel Reeves is under from her own party? Also, do you think MPs should have a second job? Surely the role of a Member of Parliament is to represent their constituents, and that needs to be the primary job, if not the only job that they undertake. The number 0344 499 1000. Calls charged at the national rate. After the break, I'll take you through all of this morning's front pages. Dr. Raj will be here, and in the interim, we'll be playing tennis. This is Weekend Breakfast.
Across the UK. On DAB+. On YouTube. On the app. On your mobile. The home of common sense. This is Talk.
Well, welcome back. I'm with Dr. Ross Persaud, getting slightly distracted talking about medical stories that we know of. Lots of messages coming in. Also, I'll take some calls as well in a minute. 2 questions for you this morning. And this is based on the Sunday Telegraph. Rachel Reeves is saying she's going to wage war on waste as Labour critics are circling. So the big story this morning is, and this has moved on somewhat, which is actually her colleagues in the Labour Parliamentary Party are increasingly frustrated by the fact that Rachel Reeves is making all the wrong headlines. And she is in China. Lots of people have said this is a terrible thing to get involved with. I think Lord Spencer said it was a pretty catastrophic mistake to go to China at this particular point in time. And so the question is, how much pressure do you think Rachel Reeves is actually under from her own party? There's another story as well about Nigel Farage, how much money he makes from 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th and 6th jobs. Should MPs have second jobs? 0344 499 1000. Those calls charged at the national rate. You can text the word talk in your message to 87222. You can message us on X as well at talkTV. Let's go through the front pages this morning. Let's start with the Sunday Telegraph. And that story we've already spoken about. Reeves to wage war on waste as Labour critics circle. So Rachel Reeves says she'll launch a war on waste to stabilise public finances amid growing disquiet from her own MPs about her handling of the economy. Essentially, the copy of the paper says she's trying to get back on the front foot after this huge week of turmoil in the financial market. She's going to lead a drive to tackle waste and inefficiency across the public sector. And here we are, Raj, with this sort of Mandarin speak, which will leave no stone unturned. Working people, 20 billion, no stone unturned.
Is that your Keir Starmer?
Yes.
Impersonation?
Yes,
very
or Rachel Reeves.
Very impressive.
Thanks.
Well, what she needs is for the numbers to turn around and be able to report a good number sooner or later. And unfortunately, it doesn't look like that's going to be happening anytime soon. OK, and Darren Jones, who's been wheeled out yet again, he obviously gave that statement to Parliament as well in a kind of very supercilious manner, but he has added that they will now introduce challenge panels. I mean, what are they? They're made up of external experts. They're being set up across every department to bring a fresh perspective on whether every penny spent is necessary or not. So essentially, they're going to harness the power of the private sector. You would have thought that after all these years in opposition, you would actually have a plan. I agree. But the challenge panels sound remarkably similar to the whole Elon Musk thing, right?
Don't they just?
So it sounds like they're just copying other people's homework.
Well, they are. But they've written, she wrote, didn't she, to all the private companies saying, have you got any good ideas?
Yeah, please.
Please. Aren't you meant to have the ideas because you're actually the Chancellor?
Yeah, that's right. So they copied the Elon Musk thing from the White House. So I hope they don't try to annex Greenland as well.
Well, we might go after some other island.
A small one that we've got a chance with.
Maybe not as big as Greenland. Let's set our sights really sort of somewhere a little more rational. So that is the controversy surrounding Rachel Reeves. The Mail on Sunday this morning, protect your money from Rachel Reeves. It's market mayhem is the strap on the top, but also Musk and Cummings in a plot to sabotage UK politics. Apparently Dominic Cummings is helping orchestrate Elon Musk's vitriolic attacks on British politicians, including Starmer, according to senior government sources. We spoke about this as well. Now, apparently Dominic Cummings is wanting to set up a new party called the Startup Party, which he hopes will smash the traditional Westminster system. I wonder how much of this is also behind Elon Musk pulling out of giving $100 million to Reform UK. Now Nigel Farage says that actually they've made up and the relationship is very strong. Apparently he is advising Musk on his mission to slash trillions of dollars from US government spending. Just an extraordinary relationship. I would never have put Dominic Cummings and Elon Musk together in the same room. Yeah,
but the other thing that the subtext behind the Mail on Sunday's headline is the idea that the original pledge not to raise income tax is probably going to disappear, and she's going to have to raise it if things keep going south.
But also
with the economy.
In many ways, it would have been much more sensible to do that instead of actually sort of pretending you weren't going to touch VAT, national insurance or income tax, and then, of course, levying employers national insurance. And the chickens are coming home to roost when you're seeing big companies laying off staff because they can't afford the employer's national insurance.
Yeah, so the problem is that if eventually she has to break that pledge, will that be the tipping point, going back to your question? When that happens, when she has to actually raise income tax.
But they've already gone against what they promised in their manifesto in the pre-election.
Yes, I know, but the point...
Well, I know they have.
Yes, OK, but when she actually has to raise income tax formally...
Yes.
Then maybe...
And do you think that is the tipping point?
Well, if the economy keeps tanking, she may be left with that option. We now have nurses in corridors, so, you know, things are not looking good for them in terms of just a general picture of how things look.
Front page of the Mirror, Sunday Mirror, this morning, 9 jobs. Nigel Farage juggles 8 part-time jobs on top of being a Member of Parliament. He's earned £571,585 in less than 6 months. Nice work if you can get it. The story that we were talking about as well, corridor care nurses to ease NHS bed crisis. This is the Whittington Hospital in Archway, is recruiting nurses to work 12-hour shifts in corridors, caring for sick patients who are waiting for a bed. Lots of people very unhappy about this. Professor Nicola Ranger, head of the Royal College of Nursing, said recruiting tired nurses to do extra shifts solely in corridors is desperate. It shows how normalised the practice has become. What was once an extraordinary escalation measure is now commonplace across our NHS. There is no scenario in which it constitutes good or safe care. It's an affront to patient safety and dignity. Adrian Boyle, President of the Royal College of Emergency Medicine, said corridor care is a sign of the total acceptance of failure. You and I have both treated people in corridors. It is impossible to do so. Not just that, but also people left on trolleys. They're really uncomfortable for many hours. Older people in corridors, lack of privacy, people walking past. It's just totally unacceptable.
But what happens is you've been left in a corridor for many, many hours. You're grateful for any kind of medical attention. So, you know, that's the psychology of that situation.
Or being treated in a chair.
Yeah, I agree. But the other thing about the headline that's interesting is about the fact they're recruiting nurses, but they don't seem to be recruiting doctors. So how come it's OK to recruit nurses to look after patients in the corridors? Who is the doctor that's going to be providing the medical care? Or are they saying, actually, we're moving towards a health service? Because you know that one of the things I think the health service is about is preventing people accessing good medical care. They throw a lot of staff between the patient and the doctor because doctors are expensive. So they're trying to give you a cheap alternative all the time to actually seeing a doctor, basically.
And of course, they then have introduced these sort of legions of other people, so healthcare assistants, I'm just thinking about.
Physician associates.
Physician associates.
The BMA have got a problem with that.
So it's about care on the cheap.
Yes, absolutely, because doctors are expensive.
Doctors are expensive.
So
they take a long time to train.
But they disguise the fact the health service has become a way to try and prevent you actually seeing a doctor, basically.
So that's corridor care nurses to ease the NHS bed crisis. I'll continue taking you through the front pages after this short break. This is Weekend Breakfast. Good morning.
When people are serving really well against you and they're in a groove, they're in a rhythm, you have to do something about that. So what you say is, you know, you're trying to be nice and appear innocent. You go, I don't know what you're doing as you cross the net to change over. You say, I don't know what you're doing, but you're serving really well. I don't know what you're doing differently, right? And so they start thinking, what am I doing differently? And because they start thinking about their serve, it gets disrupted.
Yes.
And they stop double faulting.
I mean, you make me
say,
nervous.
I'm really sorry about the fact, I don't know what happened with the serve.
Anyway. I mean, you being here makes me nervous anyway.
Quite. Now, you were
against quite.
You were against the whole idea of sport is to intimidate.
Yes.
So, you mentioned lobbing. Can I just defend the lob?
Yes.
Because it is one of my favourite tools in the arsenal.
Well, it's to think, isn't it?
Well, the ball arcs up into the air for a long period of time. So you can have a lie down. You can light a cigar, read the newspapers before the ball comes back.
I see.
There's a big advantage.
So you're buying time?
Absolutely. Yeah. Huge amount of time. Usually.
Very good.
Yeah.
I really need to see you play.
I'm not saying it's a high lob, but it comes down with ice on it, the ball.
I bet it is. Right, back to matters which are far more important than your tennis. Colin Doughty, good morning to you. Good morning. David MP should not have a second job or get winter fuel allowance and claim it on two houses. They should totally concentrate on their parliamentary works. Rachel Reeves will be gone by the end of January.
But if you only allow them to have one job, what kind of person are you going to attract into Parliament?
Well, that is a very good point.
I mean, people can't get another job.
Well,
may not be talented as.
Do we have to then pay members of Parliament far more?
Well, how much do they get paid? Is
about
it
90, don't they? 70-something, and then you get different amounts added onto that if you become a minister.
But you shouldn't be doing it for the money. You should be doing it for more noble reasons.
To serve the country.
And leave the world a better place.
By the way, he goes further to say, your guest is brilliant. Where's it gone? Your guest is brilliant. What a pleasant gentleman. You haven't met him. Let's go back to the front...
play tennis against
play tennis with him. Let's go back to the front pages this morning. The Observer, no negotiation on children's safety. Labour warns big tech. Britain's new laws to boost safety and tackle hate speech online are not up for negotiation, according to a senior government minister. This is after Meta founder Mark Zuckerberg vowed to join Donald Trump to pressure countries they regard as censoring content. It's quite interesting, the way that Zuckerberg is actually changing his stance. He says he's ditching politically biased fact-checkers, reducing restrictions on topics such as immigration, gender on Meta's platforms, including Facebook, Instagram and Threads, and obviously cozying up to the new president who takes office in just 8 days' time. This is a fascinating medical story. Front page of the Sunday Express. Game-changing new treatment to spare women years of heartache. IVF miracle powered by AI tech. So artificial intelligence being used to help women get pregnant through IVF, essentially matching the strongest sperm with the best eggs, because at the moment human error is involved. Of course, you then look at it and then scientists decide, well, we're going to match this sperm with this egg, and essentially what they're doing is harnessing the power of AI to try and increase your chances. It's a remarkable story.
But it's interesting that IVF and the idea that fertility was something that needed treating and it was an important thing. We've come on a journey there. 3 decades ago, people were asking questions about why would you fund this research? They didn't think of it as an important thing, actually. No. So it's amazing.
The first IVF baby was 47 years ago.
Yeah, but back then, those people who were pioneering the technology had to fight the Medical Research Council for funding, for example, because they were asking questions like, so if women can't get pregnant, like, so what? Was their position. So amazing.
Well, and then you have to ask yourself, should IVF be on the NHS, for example?
Yeah, well, I think you get a certain amount.
You do, yeah.
But there's a very high failure rate, and so eventually you end up going privately, and it's very expensive.
So 1 in 3 women get pregnant after the first cycle, which costs about £5,000. So if you go back to your idea, which is that you've got your discrete health budget, you could then put it forward towards IVF.
The other advantage of my pie idea, as you have so callously described it, is you can bring other money into the system. One of the problems with the NHS is people can't bring their money into the system. People could top their own health budgets up. So that may be helpful.
It may be helpful. Let us know what you think of Raj's pie system this morning. This is quite interesting. Max George exclusive, front page of The Sun on Sunday. I made my will on a phone before my heart op. Stricken pop star Max George has told how he typed out his will on his phone in hospital because he feared he would die. The wanted singer, 36, was rushed into A&E last month, underwent life-saving pacemaker surgery in Manchester. I felt like I was dying. That night, I wrote a will. And the Daily Star, you'll like this. I'd love to get some psychological insight into this. Multitasking turns you into a half-wit. Doing too many things
well,
at
that explains a lot, David.
I'm doing too much, way too much. Doing too many things at once is making us more stupid because your brain cannot cope with juggling lots of different activities at once. This is according to boffins, Raj. Yes, they say multitasking is making us thick because your brain cannot cope with doing lots of jobs at once. Boffins found it causes reduced memory, poorer decision-making, long-term brain decline. This is a neuroscientist, Dr. James Turner, saying that multitasking is a myth.
Well, this is excellent because I'm not saying we're a nation of people looking for excuses not to work, but at work, when your boss says, "Can you do this?" you can go, "I'm sorry, I can't
multitask."
Yeah, because it
because
makes
my
me
brain
stupid.
doesn't do it. Yes.
Yes, you don't want me to be stupid, do you?
No.
So,
but I wonder how much of this is true, because if you are trying to multitask, then surely you're not giving 100% attention to any one particular task, and therefore you're spreading yourself too thinly. I know I've done that.
yeah, but is it a focus thing because your attention is elsewhere? Is that why it appears that you're more stupid, or are you actually more stupid? I don't know
No.
the answer to that from the boffins. But I do think that multitasking is not a bad idea if you're trying to do a lot of things.
I also think your brain, well, you know more than me, that if you are multitasking, your brain actually works subconsciously and sorts out other problems whilst you're focusing on something else.
Well, you remember your body is multitasking. You're not aware of what your kidneys are up to, your heart.
Well, I am, actually. And my lungs.
Sorry to hear that.
Well, I'm just sitting there thinking about my renal rate and my clearance.
Oh, okay. But generally speaking, our bodies are amazing things that multitask below conscious awareness, normally.
Right, sorry. I was just thinking about my kidneys again.
Okay, right.
Yeah.
Oh, my God, now we've lost you completely.
No, you haven't. You've completely lost me. But you're right. So you're right. But actually, aren't we designed to multitask?
Well, we're designed actually to go out and throw spears at predators and stuff, right? So our brains actually evolved to live in an environment 100,000 years ago. This is an ancient idea in psychology, that one of the reasons we find the modern world so stressful, we didn't evolve to live in it. We evolved to live in a different world altogether. So we're having difficulty adapting.
And you can see that, the vestiges of our anatomy, for example, our canines to hold the meat down, our appendix, for example, Yeah,
that's right. But the things that that made us anxious in the past, like lions and tigers, you could move away from. You could run away from lions and tigers.
Good idea.
But you can't run away from a bullying boss at work in quite the same way. And that's why we find it more stressful, the modern world, because you can't move away from physical threat, which is actually what we evolved to deal with.
That's really interesting. Raj, thank you for the moment. This is Mary. Good morning to you, Mary. I love your show, and especially when Raj is your guest. He's an amazing guy, and together you present an excellent show. That's very nice, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm glad she included you in that. Remember, there's only one narcissist.
You've got to stop your family messaging in, actually. Good morning, Jennifer. Good morning, David. I think the NHS will only be recruiting nurses for corridors purely because it makes the patient believe they're actually being seen. This is your point about the nurse and the doctor, and they're on their way now to seeing a doctor, because once you've seen a nurse, you think, right, I'm on my way. Great, I'm on the home stretch. Now I'm going to see a doctor very soon, when reality is you're not going to see a doctor for another 10 hours. Lovely shirt, thank you. Well, thank you very much. How very kind. Lovely shirt, David. Thank you. Great show. This is Mick. Good morning to you. I have an idea for Reeves. Do not make cuts to pensioners and disabled welfare benefits. Stop spending billions on illegal migrants and foreign aid. Ideology, ideology, ideology. That is very true. This is driven by ideology over and above anything else.
And what they haven't had to do, because they're in opposition, was actually run an economy and see the numbers turn around. And we'll have to see whether they realise the collision between their ideology and the actual economy is such they change their ideology. Are they willing to change their mind?
And psychologically,
that's a key question.
Well, psychologically, how much would it take for Rachel Reeves to actually admit she was wrong?
I don't know, but I mean, no politician ever admits they're wrong. They just say circumstances were not quite what we expected. And we didn't realise there was such a big black hole, for example. All these excuses.
Which we're hearing a great deal. Well, you did know, actually, because you were briefed about it before you went into power, so that is untrue.
Yeah, but the trouble with all the excuses is it avoids people taking responsibility. But what they're trying to do is set targets, aren't they?
They are.
That's what, and then we'll see whether they actually hit those targets. But they haven't come up with really interesting target numbers yet. But the growth in the economy is the key one, I think. When that doesn't turn around, there's going to be a real problem.
Yeah, and that goes back to the bigger question about how long has she got, and also how much time and patience has Starmer got with her.
Well, because they're all very self-centred, the equation he's thinking about, to what extent are you getting in my way of being re-elected? The minute he decides you're a liability, because they've got no loyalty, it's over, basically.
And also, he's meant to be pretty ruthless.
They're all ruthless.
They are all ruthless. And how do you know that?
Well...
Is that what drives you into politics? Is it that the ruthlessness, or is it actually because you want to serve your country?
Well, going back to the famous book by Machiavelli, The Prince, which really is where actually political thought began. Everyone's replaceable, basically.
Everyone is replaceable, including you, Dr. Raj. Thank you very much. After the break, we'll take you through more of this morning's papers. Don't go anywhere. This is Weekend Breakfast.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Welcome back. A very good morning to you. It's just after 7 o'clock on Sunday, January the 12th. I'm David Bull. This is Weekend Breakfast. A very good morning to you. Yes, it is cold. It is dark outside. You're better off in bed watching us here on Weekend Breakfast. However, I have great news for you. Of course I do. It's Work Harder Day today, a day which is meant to motivate us to push ourselves a little further, whether it's in your personal goals, professional ambitions, or in creative projects. Yeah. Also, it's Kiss a Ginger Day today, a day to show love and appreciation for redheads around the world. I'm not even sure you can say that anymore. Anyway, it's Kiss a Ginger Day. Also, happy birthday to Jeff Bezos. He's the second richest person in the world after Elon Musk, and he turns a very youthful 61 today. Happy birthday! Yay! Yay! Right, let's move on to today's fascinating facts.
Today's fascinating facts.
So, some new ones for you this hour. On this day in 1895, the National Trust was founded by three Victorian philanthropists, Miss Octavia Hill, Sir Robert Hunter and Canon Hardwicke Rawnsley. Octavia Hill was concerned about the poor availability of open spaces for poor people. She campaigned against development on existing suburban woodlands and helped save London's Hampstead Heath and Parliament Hill fields from being built on. Its aim, the National Trust, is to preserve places of historic interest or natural beauty for the enjoyment of the British public. On this day in 1976, crime writer Dame Agatha Christie died, leaving a final book waiting to be published. According to the Guinness Book of World Records, she is the best-selling novelist of all times. Her novels have sold roughly 4 billion copies, and her estate claims that her works rank third after William Shakespeare and the Bible as the most widely published books. And I remember this vividly. On this day in 1982, Mark Thatcher, son of the former British Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher, went missing in the Sahara whilst taking part in the Paris-Dakar rally. He was rescued 2 days later, and it turned out he had lost his way. The incident provoked a tidal wave of jokes and cartoons making fun of his sense of direction. And those are today's fascinating facts. Well, a very good morning to you. It's just after 7 o'clock, Sunday, January the 12th. I'm joined by Dr. Raj Persaud, looking resplendent, waiting for your game of tennis.
Later on. You mentioned Agatha Christie.
I did, yes.
And also Mark Thatcher went missing.
Yes, you remember.
Apparently, Agatha Christie went missing for a couple of weeks, disappeared off the face of the earth, and no one knows what happened. But there's a theory that she may have had a nervous breakdown, because back in the day, you weren't really allowed. Yeah, you weren't really allowed to have a nervous breakdown.
And also, you certainly didn't talk about it.
Yes. So the fact there was I think it was a couple of weeks, I'm not sure exactly, but she went missing for a period of time, and no one really knows what happened during that time.
How interesting. And of course, Mark Thatcher, I remember that. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
He'd lost his way. That's embarrassing. Should we talk about LA and the fires?
Yeah.
Because I spoke a great deal about this. I had Caroline Faraday on yesterday talking about the scale of this. It's absolutely enormous. The winds have picked up overnight. And of course, now there are more areas of LA being affected. And of course, very big, expensive areas. And the real human cost of this, we were talking about this yesterday, saying that actually money is no barrier to losing everything. And listening to a lot of these people, it's just so heartbreaking. They didn't have time to actually pack anything. They lost everything, their memories, their photographs, little trinkets, stuff they reminded them of growing up, for example. And now there's another story, which is, was this started by someone who was an arsonist?
Yeah, there's some controversy about the theories as to why this has happened, and a lot of it is being blamed on climate change and global warming. But I think someone has been arrested carrying a propane tank. And
well, they were jumped on by members of the public.
Yeah, there was a citizen's arrest.
Yeah.
So one of the interesting questions was, is arson involved? And arson as a crime is very interesting to forensic psychiatrists because it's an unusual crime. And one of the things that's unusual about it is often a crowd gathers to watch a burning building. And there's a particular group of arsonists, and there are different kinds of categories of the kind of person who does it. But there's a particular group that actually gets almost sexually aroused by watching the fire they've started. So they turn up to be in the crowd to watch. It's a very important part of the thing. So the police now have a policy of filming the crowd that watch a burning building, because actually if there is arson involved, one of the groups of criminals involved, the kind of arsonist who's getting a kind of sexual kick from it, will be in the crowd watching the burning building. But there are other kinds of arsonists, like the people who are just doing it because of vandalism, for example.
If you think it could be serious...
Oh, I'm sorry about that. My iPad's talking to me. Carry on.
OK, right. So there's a group of people who want to destroy or vandalise and cause damage just simply because they want to destroy stuff around them. And it's a way of demonstrating power. But arson as a crime is very interesting. One final group is people who are doing it to cover up another crime. Sometimes a murder's occurred, and if you burn the building down around the body, then you think you're covering up the crime. So it's a very interesting crime if it's involved in this case.
And talking of very interesting crimes, This broke yesterday in the Daily Mail. This is about the full extent of the UK's paedophilia Asian grooming gangs. Shame is laid bare, according to the Mail Online, this big investigation. Essentially, they've revealed a map. This shows 41 towns in England where children and young women were targeted by these gangs, 76 gangs in total, taking in all corners of the country, from Plymouth in the southwest, Ramsgate in the southeast, to Barrow in the northwest, Newcastle in the northeast. This story is not going away. It is a huge problem for Keir Starmer. And the data that came out yesterday, grooming gangs are behind 2 child sexual offences reported to police every single day. And of course, Labour blocked the national inquiry into grooming gangs. I get the sense that actually Keir Starmer is very out of kilter here with the way that the British public are thinking.
Yeah, I agree with that. And obviously, it's a story that keeps coming back because it doesn't look as though enough is being done about it. And people wonder if there's some kind of political correctness problem going on as to why the government isn't taking the problem more seriously. But at another level, although obviously grooming gangs are terrible things and the penal system should be thrown at them, we do seem to have lots of young people where the parents aren't really having proper surveillance of them. There seem to be a large number of young people that are vulnerable.
But that doesn't excuse the behaviour of these men.
Obviously, yeah. But the other question is why? How come we have so many young people that are vulnerable to being recruited into them? Because the gangs work by seducing you in, by offering you stuff, right? Is it attention?
Like drugs
is it
and
money?
alcohol?
Yeah, exactly. So.
And your thoughts on that? Why are so many people able to be affected?
Well, maybe it goes back again to poverty in terms of one of the things you were talking about with MPs and the money in politics. And that means that there are large numbers of people, because they're very poor, are vulnerable as a result. This is some of the effects of poverty in terms of their exploitability by criminals.
According to the research, of the 396 known groomers to be convicted and jailed over the last 2 decades, at least 155 now released and back on the streets. The public will be absolutely horrified at that number.
And the other story that was in the papers a few days ago was about the probation service, how actually the kind of people who are in the probation service who are meant to be making these decisions are often underqualified, underexperienced, and they often make very bad decisions in some of these cases.
And there's another story this morning. This is in the Telegraph. If you are just waking up, a serving Labour MP initially rejected calls for an inquiry into grooming gangs that later found more than 1,000 children had been abused whilst authorities turned a blind eye. This is Sean Davis, representing Telford in the Commons. He was leader of Telford and Wrekin Council when he wrote to the Home Secretary and Prime Minister in 2016 rejecting a call for an inquiry into child sexual abuse in the town. He said, "We do not feel at this time that further inquiry is necessary." They did establish a local inquiry after the council changed its mind. And, of course, they found some horrible and horrific things going on. Nigel Farage has also attacked Wes Streeting. Yesterday, Wes Streeting essentially said, well, we don't need to have this national inquiry. Nigel Farage has accused Wes Streeting of attempting to cover up the truth about the grooming gangs. On Friday, as we know, Wes Streeting said that it was irresponsible and coarse public discourse, and it could lead to more atrocities against Muslims if entire communities were vilified. Now, Nigel Farage has weighed in saying that Wes Streeting's remarks are insulting. He says it's a crude attempt to stop us getting to the truth. You mentioned earlier that members of Parliament tend to be all about the Member of Parliament. Wes Streeting has a majority of, 850. His constituents are, I think he has a huge percentage which are Muslim, and he's minding his own back, isn't he?
Yeah, that's the concern, isn't it? To what extent is a political correctness woke thing going on, which is why people are turning a blind eye to this particular crime? To what extent does ideology influence the way politicians think about crime rather than thinking about victims and the suffering involved? And to what extent do the police need more resources, I think? Because that's another problem.
But how much of this do you think is also political correctness? The fact is that actually this is many people have been very concerned about what is going on, but the political correctness is that you daren't mention it because it affects Muslim men or Pakistani men, and actually that is the main reason this hasn't been brought out into the open and the cold light of day being shone on this.
But don't we need more data, though? You may well be right. Don't we need to find out a bit more about what's really going on?
Do you not get the sense that actually that data isn't available because of people being so concerned about finding out what that data is, or at least not talking openly about it?
Yeah, but then what are they really scared of? Why are they so scared? What are they frightened of? Is it not possible, if a criminal is a criminal, whatever their racial background, that the important thing is they're a criminal and they should be pursued? And as a result, there's no defence for that. So what is the wokery? What are they afraid of?
But just in terms terms of that, there's a very interesting article in the Spectator saying that actually Keir Starmer is dangerously out of touch. So any astute political leader would actually sense the mood of the country has changed dramatically. And Keir Starmer, he wasn't there at that vote. And there is a sense that he should have been there. And I'm not sure that he really does understand the mood of the country, which has certainly changed.
Yeah, it goes back to the point that we were making earlier, that he was very good at being in opposition and criticising, but he's not very good at taking the initiative and coming up with a policy initiative, doing something. That's the problem. We want leaders that will do something and address the issues. That's why Trump is so popular, because Trump says quite clearly he'll do something about people in America who are causing trouble, and he'll deport them, for example. That's one of the
and psychologically,
his popularity.
Well, what makes a good leader?
Well, a good leader captures, as you said, the mood of the people, but comes up with a solution. And that's what we're missing. We're missing solutions to these. And also, a leader captures the anxiety. Trump's very good at that. Yeah. He understands the anxiety of the electorate. And again, we're not really getting that from this current Labour regime.
And why is that, do you think?
Well, going back to Farage and all the other things that he does, to what extent have politicians entered politics because they want to represent people? Increasingly, politicians psychologically and economically are a different class to the people they represent. To what extent do they actually understand the class of people who voted for them? You know, to what extent are they actually part of that community? They're increasingly removed from that community, aren't they?
Well, I think there's another thing, which is actually many candidates are parachuted into those constituencies. They didn't grow up there. They don't know that population very well. And, of course, they then, once they're parachuted in, they then have to learn what that community is all about. Do they really understand what it's like to grow up, for example, in poverty? Do they understand the needs of their constituents?
And so that's one of the reasons why leaders like Trump have become popular. It's a rejection of the political class, is the argument. It's not just a rejection of politics, it's a rejection of the kind of people who end up appearing to represent people, because they just don't feel like they're like us, is what the electorate is saying.
And just in terms of that, Rachel Reeves, again, tone deaf, it seems to me. Your thoughts about her being in China? Because surely what you would do is delay that meeting, whilst I understand that China's an important partner, and of course it's a trading partner, and it's a huge economy, but at the same time, wouldn't you put your domestic matters first and stay in this country?
Well, the advisors around will be saying, we're in China, we've got to make China look like it's working, the fact we've chosen to be here. So release some numbers at the end about how much more business was done by the fact you turned up in China. That's what you're looking to see as a response to the criticism.
Well,
but we're not getting
that is exactly what she's done. So the Chancellor says that because of our trading relationship and the talks that we've had, it will boost our GDP by £1 billion because the government is mending relationships with China. And of course, this is what we're seeing, and I spoke about it yesterday, which is you had Cameron and Osborne talking about a new era of Chinese relations. Then you've got Rishi Sunak, who says, hang on a minute, we don't want to have that new era of relationships. Now we've got Rachel Reeves and Starmer saying this is back on again. Whilst I understand that China is important, I do think their caveat to this is you need to be careful.
Well, but also just releasing the number. What I'm interested in, what are the Chinese buying from us? I'm interested to know what do they think they can get from us. Interestingly enough, private education is one of the things the Chinese really love buying from us. You go around private schools in Britain today, they're increasingly
Chinese.
Well, that's
also because they can afford to go.
I know, they're the only ones who can afford to go.
They are the only ones that can afford to go.
Yeah, but private schools were attacked by the Labour government, yet it's one of the things the Chinese want to buy from us, in a sense.
And there's the dichotomy of its policy.
And also, actually, a lot of private schools in Britain, not a lot, some of them are setting up branches in China, which again shows it's a product the Chinese want to buy from us. Yet it's the one product the Labour government decided they didn't want anyone to buy.
Well, Rachel Reeves, this is a revival of the UK-China economic and financial dialogue, a series of regular economic meetings between the two countries. Last took place in 2019, so there has been a huge passage of time. She says she's reached agreements with the Chinese Vice Premier on financial services and agri-food. They say it's 600 million over the next 5 years. Now, I would argue that isn't a great deal of money. And if you come back and that is your only prize, was it worth going?
Also, it was very vague. I want to hear
very vague.
I want to hear more specifics. What actual examples of actual deals that were done because she turned up? How many of those deals have been done anyway?
Well, that's a very good point.
Whether she was there or not.
And just in terms of her own position, and we mentioned it right at the beginning of the programme, but the fact is Rachel Reeves has set herself these fiscal rules. She says she's going to give herself, what, $9 billion of headroom. That headroom has all been wiped out. At what point does she admit and say, I got this wrong? And wouldn't that show strength of character if she actually did do that?
But beneath that, you need a political philosophy. The last person we had...
You need to tell them that.
The last person we had in power that I think had a political philosophy, whether you liked her or not, was Margaret Thatcher. She believed in something. And actually, she hired a lot of professors of economics who backed her in terms of her economic policy. So she believed in something. We haven't had really politicians since then who seem to really believe in anything.
And why is that? Do you think we're attracting the wrong people into politics?
Well, the theory is you've got two basic kinds of politicians. You've got people who believe in something, like Mrs. Thatcher, and will persist with it no matter how unpopular it makes them, because fundamentally they still think it's good for the country. Or you have other people who just keep changing policy because all they want to do is to be popular. So they have no real belief in anything. They just constantly read the newspapers and go, OK, I'll adopt that policy because that will get me elected.
I think that's right, and I think Margaret Thatcher, for all her faults, was a conviction politician who believed in things, and that's what people want. And that is certainly what our viewers and listeners are saying, is they need a strong, charismatic leader who has belief in a particular direction and travel of policy.
Also, she had a PhD, I think. I mean,
she did,
this
in
was a
chemistry.
Lady, yeah, who was very, very bright. I mean, the papers criticised her because apparently her PhD was about putting more air into ice cream, apparently.
Well, she was something to do with Mr. Whippy. That is the sort of public rumour over Margaret Thatcher.
Yeah, anyway,
it's finally relevant. But can I just ask you about Labour's VAT raid on public schools? Because, again, this is an ill-thought-through policy, ideology over practicality. And the headline this morning, this is in the Telegraph, the third private school this week in a week has closed after Labour's introduction of VAT on fees. This is Godolphin Prep, which opened in 1993. It charges a lot of money, £12,196 a year for girls aged between 3 and 11. They said it will close at the end of the school year. So yet again, we're seeing more and more private schools closing because of the imposition of VAT, and then they have to pay the business rates on top of that. I don't think Labour has thought this through one bit.
Well, one of the things they have not thought through is that as an economy to be successful, you have to sell stuff to the world. We used to make cars, for example.
We did?
We used to...
They were rubbish cars, but we did make them.
That's why the rest of the world stopped buying them.
Yes.
Though we still make Bentleys, interestingly enough, and Aston Martins and Rolls Royces. But we have to think hard about what it is we're going to do better than the rest of the world that they will come to us to buy. And Labour didn't think of private schools as an export industry. They thought of it as something politically with class within this country.
That's really interesting.
And if you think about it as an export industry, then you don't attack it. You support it. And people all around the world have great respect for the British education system and are willing to spend large sums of money to send their children
But
in.
whilst pricing out British nationals from their own system.
Yes, but that's because, again, of the VAT raid, I think. So I think they just weren't thinking about it in the correct way. They were driven by a class ideology, which, again, may negatively affect our economy as a result. By the way, when people come from abroad and get educated here, they also take on British values, and that means they're more likely to buy British products in the future. There's a multiplier effect. So that's why I think of our education system as an export industry as well, I think.
Let's move on and talk about two quick medical stories. A large UK study has found that further evidence that people with more calcium in their diet, this is equivalent to a glass of milk a day, can reduce their risk of bowel cancer. It's really interesting. They looked at 500,000 women over 16 years. They found dark leafy greens, bread, non-dairy milks containing calcium also had a protective effect. They showed also too much alcohol and processed meat had the opposite effect. But it's fascinating, isn't it? They found that dairy products probably decrease the risk of colorectal cancer. This is a study from Oxford University Cancer Research UK. So it's down to calcium, apparently. Extra 300 milligrams of calcium in the diet or a large glass of milk lowers your risk by 17%.
I was impressed by this study. You and I both know there's studies every week that come up that say one thing and then say the opposite thing the next week. It was a sheer large number of people in the study. It was 500,000. I was very impressed with that. And I have actually changed my diet as a result. I actually try to have cereal and milk in the morning.
As do I.
Yeah. But did you change because of the study?
No, I didn't. No, I've always done it, but I have porridge and milk.
Okay, all right.
Because it's
Did you read a study about that?
Yes, that's right, because it's a low GI. No, I know that I have more energy, and it's consistent energy, and I don't have that glucose spike that I get with cereal, for example.
Yeah, and breakfast is a very important meal.
Most important meal.
Yes.
Eat breakfast like a king. Lunch like a prince, dinner like a pauper.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Right. right.
Have you not heard that?
Dressed like this, you'd have thought I would have heard
You
that.
should have done. Anyway, so that's fascinating. So more calcium in your diet. This also, I'm just very keen to get your thoughts on. Giving a work colleague an air kiss is not sexual harassment, apparently. This is according
That's
to...
a relief.
Well, exactly, because I go around kissing everyone all the time. An employment judge has ruled this. Apparently, when you pretend to kiss someone without touching... So an air kiss, which I'm sure you're
Thanks
very
for
aware
showing
of.
us.
No, you're
Thank
welcome. Cannot be regarded as unwanted conduct of sexual nature. This is all about a case about Jinjin Chen, a hospitality worker. She sued her former whiskey bar employers after her manager hugged her and gave her an air kiss. So it's not sexual harassment.
So the suing was unsuccessful then?
It was unsuccessful, yeah.
Okay, right. And is she carry on working there? Or
No, she's gone. She's gone. But he's still air kissing everyone.
Right, okay, right. I would have thought the crucial thing about air kissing is there's no tongues. I thought that was the important thing.
Thank you. On that note, Raj, let's take a break at that point. 7:23, Sunday, January the 12th. Raj will be leaving the building during this break. This is Weekend Breakfast. Good morning. Good morning to you in Staffordshire. Good morning, Dr. Bull. I love the shirt this morning. Oh, that's very kind. Thank you. I don't agree with Raj Persaud about the grooming gang. It has nothing whatever to do with poverty. None whatsoever. And Basil says, good morning, David. Listening to your comments on current grooming gangs, I expect the common denominator in each of these towns and cities is they're all run by Labour councils. Keep all of those messages coming in. Also, this morning, I'm asking, how much pressure do you think Rachel Reeves is under from her own party? This is based on the front page of the Sunday Telegraph this morning. Reeves to wage war on waste as Labour critics circle. This is saying that actually people in her own party are growing increasingly desperate over the way that she is managing or not managing the economy. So how much pressure is Rachel Reeves under? Also, there's another story about Nigel Farage and how much money he's made in his second, third, fourth and fifth jobs. And I'm just asking this morning, should MPs have a second job? Your thoughts, 0344 499 1000, those calls charged at the national rate. But now it's time for Tech Rundown.
Tech Rundown.
David Span, good morning.
Hello, David Bull.
Good nice to see you. How are you?
I'm very good.
Good, excellent, excellent. Right, lots to get through this morning because of CES, the Consumer Electronics Show, which I know you've got tons of gadgets.
Absolutely massive.
Absolutely massive. Let's start, though, with TikTok, though, because you and I have spoken about this a great deal in the past few weeks. So, at one point, it looked like TikTok was going to be banned in the United States. Then it looked like it wasn't. Then Trump changed his mind on TikTok. Now it looks like it will be banned.
Yeah, so it's literally, if nothing changes at this point, TikTok will be banned in the US in just 1 week. And then last Friday, it was basically TikTok's last stand. They presented their arguments to the 9 justices of the Supreme Court in the US, and they heard TikTok's lawyers and also from content creators and talking about sort of how TikTok may be saved. And the US government obviously has a lot of concerns about TikTok. They've had those concerns for a long while, mostly around the Chinese ownership. TikTok is owned by ByteDance, and essentially the fear is that ByteDance might be spying on 170 million US people through TikTok. However, in TikTok's defense, they contend that the ban infringes on their First Amendment rights, and saying that it's a platform for free speech. And the thing is, after the arguments were made, it seems like that the justices were sort of swaying a little bit. However, they mostly seem to be to have ended up on defending the bill to ban TikTok, which is a little bit unfortunate if you ask me.
Is it?
I think for me personally, TikTok is really sort of the zeitgeist of the moment. If we're to represent our decade with a social media, I would say it's TikTok.
But aren't you worried about Chinese ownership? And clearly the justices are, and this is cross-party in the United States. They have said that essentially they need to divest it from, or ByteDance needs to divest TikTok. And if there are security concerns, and remember these are predominantly very vulnerable people, young people who are using TikTok, and if the Chinese government is actually gleaning information, then clearly that is a national security threat, isn't it?
There definitely is the potential for it to be a national security threat. However, there hasn't been any direct evidence supporting the fact that the Chinese government has access to US citizens' data. However, the potential is always there.
But what I find a bit odd about this argument about spying is all tech is spying on everyone.
Of course it is.
So I don't understand
and
why
it's also about the cookies, isn't it? It's accept all cookies, which means basically they can look at everything you do. I mean, isn't there... essentially the US is saying they're very deeply worried about the Chinese state being involved in this, and therefore that is why they don't like TikTok.
But given all tech is spying on everyone, the better argument would be, because I know I visited China recently, went to Shanghai, and you're not allowed to use Google. You can't use Google in China. So the Americans should have said, let us have Google in China and we'll let you have TikTok over here, because, you know, that's a better way of operating.
And that's really interesting.
That's a very good idea, yeah.
And so how do they actually close it down? Because you can't really just shut it, but you can stop any updates.
Yeah, TikTok has already talked about this. Their idea is basically, if the ban does go forth, the app will essentially go dark on App Store. So if you can't download the app on the Google Play Store or the Apple App Store. However, if you have the app already installed, you can still continue using it. However, the user base would, I assume, decline over time.
And talking about Google then, but also social media companies like Facebook, for example, it's interesting, isn't it, the way that they are actually now aligning, shall we say, with Donald Trump. Of course, he's coming in as US president, and they are trying to be friendly towards him. But this big story about Meta abandoning the use of independent fact-checkers on Facebook and Instagram and replacing them with X-style community notes, what does that mean for the average consumer?
I think it's actually a really good idea, because if we sort of have a look at what Facebook and Meta have been doing around the world, and they're going to continue doing this in the EU and UK, is that they've got fact-checkers checking everyone's social media posts. So if you say something really controversial, an actual person would look at it and say, no, actually, that doesn't abide by our community guidelines, you're gone. On Twitter/X, we've had something called community notes for quite a while before Musk actually bought the platform. And basically, this hands off the moderation guidelines to the community. And so if you see a post that, you know, it might be a little bit incorrect, you can just make a note saying, actually, you know...
Oh, so anyone can do it?
So basically anyone can do it. It still has to be approved.
It's a bit like Wikipedia then, isn't it?
Precisely.
It's a Wikipedia model.
And I think, although there are fears that miscommunication, sort of like information that's incorrect would propagate on the platform. I actually think because there's so many more people doing the fact-checking, it's the whole community doing it, it might actually be more effective than just a few actual people checking
But what counts as a fact? And
I know.
This is the thing I found a bit
But also, I
surprising.
see the other problem with the fact-checkers is that also they are going to be swayed by their own political priorities. So therefore, that will then change the way they see those facts.
But I want to know how they operate, really. Well, what counts as a fact, who these people are, how they make the decisions. Some examples of that. Again, they gloss over all of that.
They do.
I think. And the fact that Nick Clegg has left is also very interesting.
It is. And he's been replaced, hasn't he, by Joel Kaplan, who's a prominent Republican. And, of course, I believe that there is a lot of politics involved. Very quickly, if we can... Caroline Faraday talking about these terrible fires in Los Angeles and these scooper planes. Amazing. Just incredible. I don't know if you've seen this. They basically get 1,500, gallons of ocean water. There's a lot of water. They scoop it out of the ocean. You can see pictures here. And they dump it on fires. But something terrible happened yesterday.
Yeah, so Canada has supplied 2 of these super scoopers, as we call them. And these are really vital in combating these Los Angeles fires. And unfortunately, however, one of them was grounded recently, I think last Thursday.
Oh, was it last Thursday?
Yeah, because it actually crashed into a consumer drone that was probably illegally filming the fires. And luckily, the plane landed safely. It only created a small hole in the wing, and no injuries were reported. However, this damaged aircraft was one of the main planes that was fighting the fires, and this accident actually also caused other firefighting aircraft to be temporarily grounded due to safety concerns.
But also, what sort of person uses a drone to film fires when people's lives are in danger?
Yeah, I think we really need to sort of make sure that people do not fly drones where they're not supposed to.
It's illegal.
Yeah, it really is illegal. And the thing is, it's very tempting to take your drone if you've got one and film, film natural disasters, because they go crazy on social media. Like, this sort of content does really, really well. However, with the fear that it could actually impede on firefighting, procedures, it really should be
I have to go to a break, but what's the psychology of someone who actually wants to use a drone to film suffering of other people?
But that goes back to what I was talking about, the psychology of an arsonist, because actually arsonists like watching fires. They find them deeply fascinating. So that the person who was on that flying that drone is part of a spectrum heading in the direction, which is not a good one.
It's not a good one. That's an understatement, Dr. Raj. Davis, thank you for the moment. We'll pause. We'll take a break. After the break, we're going to be talking about the Consumer Electronics Show. This is something Davis gets very excited about. It's the most powerful tech event in the world, taking place in Las Vegas, and you've got some goodies up your sleeve. We'll reveal all of those after this break. sector is central to the mission to transform public services, drive economic growth, boost productivity. But I would have agreed that actually CES is absolutely pivotal in this. Now, let's tell us some of the gadgets that are making the headlines at CES.
Okay, so this first one is quite interesting, especially for those who are hard of seeing. So we're all familiar with, with canes. It's basically just a stick. It's been around for a long time, and not a lot has happened with the idea of a cane. However, WeWalk have come out with the Smart Cane 2, and basically it's a stick, a cane, but with some smart enhancements. So firstly, you've got AI. It's 2025. Obviously, there's AI, so you can ask your smart cane to what's the time, what's the weather, all those typical smart assistant stuff.
Why can't you ask your watch instead of the cane?
Because they like to say that, if you're hard of seeing, obviously getting your phone out is a little bit difficult. If it's something that you're already holding in your hand, it makes it a little bit easier. It's slimmer than before. It's got tactile buttons instead of a touchpad, and you'll be very interested to know that it actually does help people, navigate the world, because it's got sensors. It'll tell you there's something, in front of you, and it can also see what's above you. So if you're going to crash into a very low-lying sign or something, it will tell you.
How will it tell you?
It's got sensors.
Okay, it's got sensors. Raj, and marks out of 10.
Zero.
I agree with that. Okay,
I don't understand that gadget at all.
I don't understand that either. Now, this is another strange gadget. This is about a fork. This is a fork, which is a smart fork. It's not any fork, Raj. Okay. It's a smart fork.
All right.
Yeah, so Kieran Holdings, they've actually developed a range of utensils, namely the one that they were showcasing mostly was the electric salt spoon, and it's a device that's designed to sort of enhance the saltiness of the food that you're eating. It enhances taste, so it emits a gentle electric current that stimulates the tongue salt and umami receptors, and it makes low sodium foods taste saltier without adding actual salt. So if you want to reduce your salt intake, then this is the perfect gadget for you.
Sounds a lot of hoo-ha for no gain, Raj.
So it makes the food taste saltier?
Yeah, so it sends an electric current. You have to hold it in a very specific way, sort of like you're a child and you're grasping the spoon with your entire hand, and basically sends a current, and then it enhances the taste receptors.
So the current through your body?
Yes, your umami receptors in your mouth.
All right, okay.
Apparently, it's quite difficult to use because you have to grasp it in a certain way. You do have to
we're confused as it is.
But it's already available in Japan, and it will be available in the West for roughly £100 later this year.
£100. Okay. So you have less salt on your food.
But the future is here. Obviously, it's going to be spicy food next, or any kind of food. It can make anything taste like anything.
I imagine. If they can get the right current.
You then don't eat, and the fork stimulates your...
It makes things taste terrible, so then you stop eating, and then you lose weight, and you look amazing.
Well, there we are then. So we're all in favour of that. Now, I know you are a fan of smart glasses, but there are tons at CES.
Yeah, so I think last year, it was really the year of smart glasses, or their inception, rather. We all love our glasses over here, but imagine, David, if you could read your notes through your glasses.
Imagine if you could read your notes.
Wouldn't that be really cool?
Well, at my age, I'd be very pleased with that.
So the big one was the Meta glasses last year, and basically they did really well sales-wise.
Really?
Right.
They actually did, and it sort of incited this whole range of new smart glasses. Okay. The one that I like most is the Halliday AI smart glasses, and that's because it just looks like a normal pair of glasses, but it's got a tiny little display right above, like on the top of the frame, and you can control that with gestures, with a smart ring as well, and then you can read notifications, get directions, do different things with that display.
So you read them whilst you're talking to someone?
Yes. Does that frighten you, David?
It does frighten me, because I want you to concentrate on talking to me.
So it could look like you're having a conversation or attending a lecture.
But you're actually reading notes.
Yes, or a film.
Actually, what's to stop you cheating in an exam?
Yes, good point.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes,
interesting your mind went there.
I assume in exams in the future, a little bit like how they check which calculator model you have, they'll check what glasses you have.
There are so many here. I was reading about the Rocket glasses. A mini desktop pops up. Then then, according to the copy here, a rocket staffer began speaking to me in Chinese, and the text then translated it into the glass so that you actually know what they're saying.
Oh.
So that's quite interesting.
That's interesting.
Yeah, there's a lot of different smart glasses. Some of the bulky ones, like the one that you were just mentioning, do have like actual screens that project onto the lenses itself. So that's quite interesting.
So what could happen in the future is that someone is talking about something.
Glasses? I'm just realised.
It's for the segment.
Yeah, for the segment. So what could happen is you're having a conversation with someone and it suggests conversational topics. It suggests ways of being witty, you see, or
Have
charming.
we really got to that stage where we have to do that?
Some people need those guys.
Well, they do. Let's talk about, I'm all in favour. I've got a robot vacuum cleaner.
do.
It is absolutely useless. It doesn't do anything anymore. And
But it is
there's
spying on you.
It probably is spying on me.
Yeah.
But it trundles around, not picking anything up and doesn't do anything. And, of course, now the company has gone broke. So, therefore, it doesn't update. It doesn't actually clean. But there's a new one, isn't there, with an arm?
Yeah, it seems like at all of these trade shows, robot vacuum cleaners are the centre of attention for some reason. I think in the previous one that we looked at in Berlin, there was a robot that could climb stairs, but now we've got a concept robot from Dreamy that with an actual robotic arm. So basically, you can program it to pick up items like shoes, like socks, like toys, as we can see, and then sort of just like deposit them in certain locations around the house. So the problem with robot vacuum cleaners is that, you know, you sort of need to pre-clean for them. You have to get rid of cables, you need to get rid of shoes, you know, they can get tangled on shoelaces. And now it can tidy for you and clean as well. So is this a gadget that you might be buying?
No. What else have you got?
Okay, and we've also got a smart bathroom mirror from Withings. It's called the Omnia. This is just a concept at the moment, but basically you you step onto this sort of like a bathroom scale thing that's attached to a mirror as well, and it will take a variety of bodily scans, not only from the mirror itself, but also your wearables like your ring, like your smart watch as well, and it will give you an overview of your health for the day. It'll be like, you have to do 10,000 steps because you only did 2,000 last week or whatever.
Or you have to do 50,000.
Yes.
Because you're in really bad shape.
And there's so much more. You've got a rollable laptop. The time is very tight here. A terrible one, which was the laptop with an air freshener, which I saw no point in.
Yeah, we saw a rollable laptop, which is, you know, very advanced. And then on the other end of the scale, we've got a laptop with an air freshener, literally just stuck to the back of it.
But it's a new laptop. You have to buy the whole laptop.
It is a laptop, but, you know, imagine that if you really wanted this technology, you could just stick a normal air freshener to the back of any laptop, really. But, you know, this is what ASUS thinks is a good idea in China.
But for people who work in special environments, like abattoirs or something.
That's quite a limited market, may I just suggest. And then finally, if we can, I'm wearing a smart ring. There is a new smart ring. It has a twist to it.
Yeah, so it's the Ultra Human Smart Ring Air. I'm wearing one, but unfortunately the old version, because they've just come out with a version that costs almost £2,000 because it's made of solid gold or platinum. You get to pick.
It's an engagement one, right? Maybe
the problem
that's an engagement ring.
The problem is with the smart ring, as we all know, is that the batteries do not last. They can only do around 500 charges, even less. My one personally only lasted 6 months before I had to get a replacement. So if you're buying a £2,000 smart ring that only lasts 6 months, then I don't think that's the best of investments.
So I think I bought mine right at the beginning of starting here, so about 2.5 years ago. I now can only wear it for 3 days before it needs recharging. So it loses huge capacity.
Yeah, that's because the batteries are so small, and the smaller the batteries are, the less long they last.
But it's having to read a lot of data from you, David.
So much, but then you become obsessed by it, because I then look in the morning to see how well did I sleep.
Yeah, and it will sync with your smart mirror.
That leads to insomnia.
It leads to insomnia, right? And then I'm looking at how much REM and deep sleep I have, and then I think, well, I can't go to work because I haven't had enough REM sleep. And so on and round we go. Davis, thank you so much. Always good to see you. That was today's Tech Rundown.
Tech Rundown.
Right, we'll take a break. After the break, we'll take some of your calls, your thoughts, your messages. Dr. Raj will stay with me for the next 10 minutes or so. Don't go anywhere. This is Weekend Breakfast.
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Welcome back. This is Talk 750. Dr. Raj is with me. Cindy, good morning in Michigan in the United States. Always a pleasure. Good morning.
Oh, good morning, Dr. Bull. Always a brilliant show.
Oh, bless you.
Excellent guest.
Oh, he's all right.
Always exceptional.
What's on your mind?
You're the devil.
I know I am. What's on your mind this morning?
No. Well, I wanted to say, I always have a fear of lobbyists getting involved. So if your MPs are able to have a second job, they could get mixed up with things that they shouldn't. And I feel like right now, and I think the same of my representatives, we need to focus. There's a lot going on right now. Maybe later, but right now is not the time to even have that discussion.
So the complex bit about this, and there's something that Raj mentioned, was that many MPs go into it not because the money isn't actually out there in terms of the amount that they're earning, and so they have supplementary income from these second jobs. So if you say you cannot, have a second job, then does it change the type of person that goes into politics? And I don't know the answer to that.
It would change the type of person, and you would get the right type of person, because if think of it this way, if on the salaries that they make right now, if they cannot live decently, how's everybody else supposed to live decently?
It's a great point, but then maybe we should pay MPs more and you'd attract a better calibre of Member of Parliament.
No, because maybe they would be comfortable and they wouldn't try as hard to get the earnings up for everybody, because they would be everyone. They need to be a part of everyone and what everyone is going through.
Yeah, it's a really good point, Cindy. Thanks ever so much.
It's very important.
I agree with you, Cindy. Really good to talk to you this morning. That's Cindy in Michigan in the United States. Loads of messages coming in. Louise says, Dr. David, I love Dr. Raj. You have both put, at least someone does, you both put a smile on my face in these dark times. What are you going, where are you going boating? She'd like to know. It's tennis.
That's the next activity I must take
yes,
up.
let's
Henley,
go boating.
Regatta. Yeah.
Very good idea.
Change hat, though.
Good morning, David. Pat in West Sussex. You talked and joked about your smart ring and you assumed us viewers knew what it did. Oh, I'm so sorry. So this ring monitors everything I do, whether it's my heart rate, it actually monitors and measures how much sleep I have, or my REM sleep, deep sleep, and so on. It's what is called a wearable, isn't it?
But there's some controversy within the profession as to whether it's actually good for you, because you get overly obsessed, as you said, with your sleep.
You do.
And you then think, oh, I didn't sleep last night because the ring tells me I didn't.
Also the ring is not necessarily accurate.
That's right. But getting overly obsessed with your sleep patterns as presented by the data of phones and apps,
it's the first thing I do.
It seems to be creating a whole tidal wave of insomnia, because the more preoccupied you get with sleep, the less likely you are to sleep, because you get anxious about sleep. And it's about this idea of sleep as a vitamin. People walk around thinking sleep's a vitamin, I have to have it. And as a result, they get anxious when they find they're awake at night, and then they don't sleep.
Which is what I have. Very good, very astute of you,
you need
Doctor.
to relax about not sleeping, and then you'll sleep. It's a paradox.
Well, and also, it doesn't help the hours I do, does it? Getting up at 2 o'clock in the morning is not exactly conducive to a good night's sleep, let me tell you. David, it's my birthday today. I'm off to Spain. This is Simon in Portsmouth. Good morning. Happy birthday to you. My birthday wishes are that Raj stays for the whole 4 hours and Starmer the granny harmer is gone soon. Simon, happy birthday.
Another relative ringing in.
Yes, absolutely. Simon in Portsmouth. Keep all of those messages coming in, please. I'm asking 2 big questions this morning. How much pressure do you think Rachel Reeves is actually under from her own party? This is based on the front page of the Sunday Telegraph. Apparently, she's facing mounting pressure from her own MPs. Support for the Chancellor is evaporating, even amongst her supporters, some privately calling for her to resign. It follows a week in which the Treasury, of course, was forced to intervene to stabilise the financial markets. Rachel Reeves, of course, in China. It's interesting that, isn't it, that you, and we spoke about this right at the beginning, there comes a time when everyone is on your side and then one after another start to change their mind, and at some point, and we've spoken about this, the tipping point when they then conspire against you.
But if she gets some major figures in British industry or business or the CBI...
Can she?
if she gets them to speak up for her, then that will save her. Yeah, that's the question, because they don't seem to be around. Yeah, she can obviously get some Chinese people to speak up for her.
And well, I'm sure her trip went very well indeed. But the
Chinese government, big fans.
Big fans of Rachel Reeves. Yes, absolutely.
Not us though.
Well, I'm sure there are lots of people who are fans of Rachel Reeves. So let me just put that out there. Keep all of those messages coming in, please. How much pressure do you think Rachel Reeves is under from her own party? Also, this idea about MPs. This is what Cindy was talking about. Should MPs have second jobs? Nigel Farage has however many. He's earned £570,000.
Or should they be forced to earn the average income?
Very good
So
point.
they learn to live know what it's like to be an average Briton.
Very good point. And on that note, thank you very much indeed for being with me this morning. I hope tennis goes very well.
Thank you.
Always a great pleasure to see you. Am I seeing you again soon?
I hope so.
Tennis?
Yes. Yeah, let's play.
Okay. We'll play tennis. Raj, thanks ever so much for coming in. After the break, we will go through all of this morning's top political stories. Don't go anywhere.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Hello, a very good morning to you. It's just after 8 o'clock on Sunday, January the 12th. I'm David Bull. This is Weekend Breakfast. Great news for you if you are just waking up this morning. It's Work Harder Day today. Oh, great news. A day which is meant to motivate us to push ourselves a little further, whether it's in personal goals or in professional ambitions or creative projects. Yeah, push yourself, work harder. Also, today is Kiss a Ginger Day. I'm not sure you can say that, but anyway, it's a day to show love and appreciation for redheads around the world. Yes, kiss the ginger. Also, happy birthday to Jeff Bezos. He's the second richest person in the world after Elon Musk. He's a very youthful 61 today. Happy birthday. Let's move on to today's fascinating facts.
Today's Fascinating facts.
So today's fascinating facts, new ones for you this hour. On this day in 1866, the Aeronautical Society of Great Britain was formed in London 37 years before the Wright brothers actually achieved the first successful powered flight. On this day in 1950, the British submarine Truculent collided with a Swedish oil tanker, Divina, in the Thames. The two vessels actually remained locked together for a few seconds before the submarine sank, which very sadly resulted in the deaths of 64 people. An inquiry attributed 75% of the blame to Truculent and 25% to Divina. Truculent was sold and broken up for scrap in May of 1950. And on this day in 2001, Sven-Göran Eriksson became the first foreign coach of the England football team. In 2006, he was recorded as saying he would be willing to leave England to manage Aston Villa if England won the World Cup, after being duped into believing that a wealthy Arab would buy the club and wanted him as manager. The wealthy Arab, of course, was in fact a fake sheikh, an undercover News of the World reporter. That was in 2001, and those are today's fascinating facts. Well, I've got some breaking news for you at the top of this hour. The LA fires are raging once again. The death toll has risen to at least 16 as firefighters brace for intense winds. So overnight, the winds have picked up. And of course, this is what I was talking to Caroline about yesterday. The fact is, just the numbers of people affected. Yesterday, there was something like 200,000 people under evacuation orders. Another 200,000 had been advised that they may have to evacuate soon. Of course, technological glitches meant that loads of people across LA were actually informed that they had to move. That was incorrect. We talked about that yesterday. And now Brentwood, which is a very exclusive suburb of LA, is under threat from these raging wildfires. Earlier on, I was talking to Raj Prasad, a psychiatrist, about what motivates people and in terms of trying to set fire to things. And there are reports that there is an arrest of an arsonist. And what motivates someone to set fire deliberately and willfully to the shrubbery to cause such immense damage to people in LA? We also had that conversation yesterday about whether the insurance companies would pick up the tab. There are reports they will pick up something like 50% of the bill. I don't know whether that is true or not. Or is it actually an act of God? I know many people just thankful to be alive, even though they haven't been able to take their possessions with them. We'll bring you more on that as and when we get it. But the fire's death toll has risen to at least 16 as firefighters brace for intense winds. So really shocking coverage there of what is going on in LA. And that is the front page of the Sunday Telegraph this morning. A big picture just of the fire raging out of control, which you can see there. Alongside that, Rachel Reeves on the front foot, or at least trying to be on the front foot. Rachel Reeves will launch a war on waste, apparently, to stabilise public finances amid growing disquiet from her own MPs over her handling of the economy. Now, essentially, what she's trying to do is to get back onto the front foot, and this is after the turmoil that we've seen in the markets. She says she's going to lead a major new drive to tackle waste and efficiency across the public sector, which will leave no stone unturned, in her own words. Darren Jones has been wheeled out again, the Chief Secretary to the Treasury, saying officials will work with the private sector to embrace their ideas, their expertise and their innovation to further our public services. Also, he says they're going to have challenge panels made up of external experts. They're being set up across every department to bring a fresh perspective on whether every penny spent is necessary or not. There's another really interesting story this morning if you're waking up. Front page of the Mail, Elon Musk and Dominic Cummings apparently in a plot to sabotage UK politics. So the rumour is they're working together, and the Labour sources are pointing to the fact that many of these tweets, like two-tier Keir, is not something that Musk would necessarily say. And this has the hallmark of Cummings written all over it. They also point to the fact that these tweets are coming out in the middle of the day here, which means Elon Musk would be asleep. I would counter that by saying, well, actually, you can have timed tweets. The Mirror, front page of the Mirror this morning, 9 jobs. Nigel, talking about Nigel Farage making £571,000 on the side in less than 6 months. And that's why I'm asking this morning, should MPs actually have a second job? The number 0344 499 1000, those calls charged at the national rate. You can text the word talk in your message to 87222. You can message us on X as well. Also, the other question I want to ask this morning, how much pressure do you think Rachel Reeves is under? This is a huge story. There is a real sense that actually the backbench Labour MPs are growing increasingly angry with the way the government is handling things, and particularly with that very ill thought through budget, in my humble opinion. How much pressure is she actually under? Well, joining me now is Kevin Schofield, political editor at the Huffington Post UK. Good morning to you.
Morning, David.
So this is interesting. The front page, as I said, the Sunday Telegraph this morning, Rachel Reeves desperate to try and get onto the front foot. She says she will launch a war on waste to stabilise public finances amid growing disquiet from her MPs over the handling of the economy. I think it is a fair assumption to say that the whole thing has been pretty disastrous. When you look at the way the markets have turned on her, she's even got her own fiscal rules, which she looks like she's going to break. She doesn't have the fiscal headroom that she thought she would have. She's spending £100 billion more than the Tory plans. You've got Lord Spencer saying she's got herself into a catastrophic mess. When she says she's going to wage war on waste, is this going to be enough to turn the tide of opinion, particularly her own backbenchers against her?
I wouldn't have thought so, David. I mean, I wish I had £1 for every time a government of any colour has said they're going to wage a war on waste and improve efficiency. We'd probably be able to wipe out the budget deficit if that were the case. I mean, yeah, it tends to be the last resort of a chancellor who is running out of options, who can't get their hands on any money. You know, she's really boxed herself in here. She said that she won't raise taxes again after the last budget obviously raised £40 billion worth of taxes. They can't borrow anymore because, as we've seen in the last few days, the cost of government borrowing has gone up to record levels certainly over the last 15 years. So the only other option really is cuts, or, as it says here, cutting out waste. But you've got to imagine, I mean, the last Conservative government were forever saying that they were cutting down on waste and improving efficiency. Surely, to goodness, there can't be that much left to cut. So yeah, she's really got herself into a real fankle. And you mentioned there as well about her fiscal rules. You know, the Treasury put out a statement a few days ago saying they are absolutely wedded to those fiscal rules of bringing debt down as a proportion of the economy by the next Parliament. I mean, that leaves her so little room for manoeuvre. And, you know, if she were to come back and put up taxes again as an emergency measure, the political ramifications of that would be absolutely huge. So, yeah, everywhere she looks right now, she's in an awful lot of trouble.
And just in terms of that, we talked about the fact that Treasury waded in, or you just mentioned that. The fact is they've had to support Rachel Reeves. I would have thought that actually that is a very warning and worrying sign for her. But also, according to this article, the support for her has evaporated. Even those members of Parliament who supported her are now saying that actually they don't support her anymore. I think the Labour MPs are so frustrated that what should have been the honeymoon of this administration is it's definitely over.
Oh yeah, there's no doubt about it. It's definitely well and truly over. I think there's a lot of disquiet amongst Labour MPs way back to when she cut winter fuel allowance. You know, that is something that I know that Labour MPs are still getting in the neck from their constituents, from pensioners, or from those whose parents or grandparents are missing out on this payment, and they really think that was an unnecessary own goal. It doesn't actually raise all that much money, not when you take into account the fact that there's been this big drive to get more pensioners to claim pension credit, so they also get their winter fuel allowance as well. Once you add that into the mix, it's not saving an awful lot of money at all, and they just don't realise why she decided to do it so early in the government's time in office. It's dogging them all the way up until the present day, and will continue to do so unless they find the money to U-turn on that, although I don't see that happening. So yeah, there's definitely disquiet at the Chancellor's performance. The one thing she's got in her favour, though, is that she is absolutely in lockstep with Keir Starmer. It's not a case of, you know, the Tony Blair, Gordon Brown years of number 10 and number 11 being at each other's throats. They're absolutely wedded politically together. So really, I think that probably saves her for the moment. But we do know that Keir Starmer can sometimes be pretty ruthless. So maybe a year or two down the line, things might change. But right now, I don't think her position is under serious threat.
And just in terms of that, I mean, Rachel Reeves is saying that China is crucial for UK growth. She's basically saying the reason I'm in China is because I can bring in 600 million quid to the economy over 5 years. That doesn't seem like a lot of money to me.
No, not in the grand scheme of things. It's not. And, you know, this trip, I think, has been really badly timed. Now, as you'll know, these trips are, there's a lot of planning goes in it. It'll have been months in preparation. I think it would have been difficult for her to pull out at the last minute. That would have looked like she was panicking. So really she had to go ahead with it. But timing wise, it's not great for her to be out of the country when there is all this turmoil on the markets. The value of the pound is going down. As I say, the cost of government borrowing is going up. So I think she'd much rather be here, look like she's taking control of the situation rather than being overseas. And it is controversial that the UK is seen to be cozying up to China at a time when other Western nations are looking to move away from China because they see them as a threat. So yeah, it is definitely a bit of a gamble, and she's really got to hope that it pays off.
Now, Keir Starmer obviously trying desperately to put a lid on the grooming gang scandal. The Daily Mail yesterday published a map which illustrated the full detail to the extent to which the grooming and rape culture spread across towns of England. So they say there are 41 towns in England where children and young women were targeted by these gangs, 76 gangs in total, taking in all corners of the country, from Plymouth to Ramsgate to Barrow in the northwest, Newcastle in the northeast. One of the most staggering facts here is that of the 396 known groomers to be convicted and jailed over the last 2 decades, 155 have been released and are back on the streets, many of them back on the same streets where they offended. This is a problem for Keir Starmer. It is not going away, and yet he whipped his MPs into voting against having a national inquiry.
Yeah, it's quite an astonishing story. You're right, and the fact that these men are back on the streets again, I think this will only add to the calls for a national inquiry. It was interesting that the government's position did subtly shift last week from being absolutely, we do not need a national inquiry. There's all these local inquiries. We've still got to implement the Alexis J inquiry recommendations. But there was a subtle, as I say, change in language, I think, from the Prime Minister and from the government as a whole, that, you know, they will listen to victims, and if the mood changes, if more victims say they want a national inquiry, I mean, not all victims say they want one, some say they don't, but a lot of them say they do. I think if that builds momentum, then I wouldn't rule out a national inquiry at some stage. But what he doesn't want to do, the Prime Minister, is give the Conservatives and Reform a win at this particular moment in time. They're obviously calling for a national inquiry now. I think it would be seen as weak for him to U-turn right away, but I think maybe further down the line I wouldn't rule out a national inquiry taking place, and I think stories such as this will only, as I say, increase calls for a national inquiry.
Well, of course, and Reform UK says they will carry out a national inquiry even if the government don't actually agree to it. There are 2 more stories in the press this morning. A serving Labour MP initially rejected calls for an inquiry into grooming gangs that found more than 1,000 children had been abused whilst authorities turned a blind eye. This is Sean Davis representing Telford in the Commons. He was leader of Telford and Wrekin Council. He wrote to the Home Secretary and Prime Minister in 2016 rejecting the call for an inquiry into child sexual abuse. You've also got Wes Streeting yesterday actually saying, well, hang on a minute, he said it's irresponsible and coarse public discourse. It could lead to more atrocities against Muslims if entire communities were vilified. I'm very mindful of the fact he only has a majority of 528 in Ilford North, and Nigel Farage has seized on this to say that Wes Streeting's remarks are insulting.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at Wes Streeting's remarks in the round, I mean, he did say that, you know, what happened in the grooming gangs has been absolutely disgusting and people were let down. I think he's talking about the language, in particular language being used by Robert Jenrick, who's talked about medieval attitudes of alien cultures coming into this country. And I thought it was actually interesting that Steve Baker, the former Conservative MP, certainly no bleeding heart liberal, he said a couple of days ago that he's very concerned at the use of that type of language, which he said opened the door to racism. So yeah, I think there's that. Yeah,
but isn't this part of having an honest? But don't you think, Kevin, this is about having an open, honest debate about actually what is going on in this country? Who knew what? When did they know it? And why weren't we told what they knew?
No, absolutely, and as I say, that's why I think the calls for a national inquiry will only increase, and I would not be surprised if ultimately that's what happened. There is clearly an awful lot of public anger. I think politicians on both sides of the political divide have to be careful in the language that they use, and you know, Wes Streeton has to be careful not to be given the impression that he is dismissing people's concerns. I don't think that's what he was actually trying to do, actually. But yeah, I can understand why, you know, his political opponents might want to leap on those comments, and that shows why it's such a politically difficult issue for Keir Starmer.
And of course for him, for Wes Streeting, Muslims are the largest religious group in Ilford North, where he is Member of Parliament. They make up a third of his constituency's population. How much of this is him actually trying to shore up support for his seat, do you think?
Well, as you said, I mean, he came perilously close to losing his seat in July, largely over the Gaza issue. I mean, we know that a lot of other Labour MPs weren't quite so fortunate as him and did lose large majorities to independent Gaza campaigners. So there's no doubt that he will be hearing concerns, I guess, from British Muslim voters in his area, that they say that they feel perhaps being persecuted and being tarred with the same brush as those involved in the Grooming gang. So I can understand where he's coming from as a constituency MP, obviously. But as I say, this is such a difficult issue now for the government, and more stories like the one in the Mail yesterday will only, as I say, increase calls for a national inquiry, I think.
And also, if I can just bring in the front page of the Daily Mail this morning, or the Sunday Mail, Musk and Cummings in a plot to sabotage UK politics. This big story about Elon Musk coming together with Dominic Cummings to tweet about the Labour government. We know Elon Musk has been prolific on X, talking about the incompetence of the Labour government. Labour on the front foot here, saying that you can tell that this is to do with Cummings because these tweets are sent at a time when it's daytime here in the United Kingdom, but that Musk would actually be asleep at that particular point. I would argue that you can actually make sure that you schedule those X's to go out at particular points. There's an interesting story in The Spectator which starts the refusal of Western elites to admit the failings of multiculturalism and their ongoing mollycoddling of minority vested interests is giving birth to white identity politics, the troubling big picture that is taking place here in the UK. I'm paraphrasing this. But it goes further, and it's a really important point. It says any astute progressive political leader would sense a major shift in the tectonic plates of public opinion and would be adjusting his tone accordingly. But Starmer has sought to pillory white working class people and anyone else angry about shocking atrocities as far right. Do you think Starmer is tone deaf?
On this issue, I think his language was a little bit loose in the press conference that he gave last Monday. I think what he was trying to say, he was accusing the Conservatives basically of jumping on a far-right bandwagon, as he would describe it. You know, he's talking about Elon Musk lionising Tommy Robinson, saying he should be released from prison, but also, you know, backing these calls for a national inquiry. Then the Conservatives come out and do it, and I think that was what he was getting at. The problem was that the language he used gave the impression, certainly, that perhaps he was saying that those who wanted an inquiry were far right. I don't think that is what he was trying to say. I think he was attacking the Conservatives, and his spokesman clarified that later on. But yeah, again, it just shows the importance of politicians being careful with their language. And that story on the front of the Mail on Sunday is absolutely fascinating. I think it's an interesting political love triangle almost. You've got Elon Musk, Dominic Cummings and Nigel Farage all in the same space.
Well, Nigel Farage says they've made up. They've kissed and made up.
Fascinating, isn't it? Especially when you see what Elon Musk said about him.
Well, that's very true. Also, just in terms of Labour's tenure in office, the third private school in a week has closed after Labour's introduction of VAT on fees at the start of the month. This is Godolphin Prep, opening in 1993. It says we now have to shut. Of course, private schools are being levied with VAT and business rates. We talked about it this morning, about this as ideology over practicality of policy. it just seems that in the 6-7 months that Labour has been in power, none of these policies have been really thought through, and particularly the impact of those policies and the ramifications of those policies. Take these kids, for example. Where are they going to go to school?
Well, you're right. They're going to have to go into the state system, which obviously means that it's a bigger drain on the state's resources. Now, the whole point, we were told, of this policy was that it was going to raise millions of pounds in extra taxation, which was going to be used to employ more maths teachers. But if the unintended consequence is the closure of these schools and then those pupils having to go into the state system, or parents pulling their kids out of schools or choosing not to send their kids there in the first place, it means that the state school population is going to go up, which obviously means that they've got to be paid for. So again, in the final reckoning, the money raised may not be actually what the government or what Labour said it would be before the election. And you're right, there's been a series of mistakes by the government. Some of them you would have thought were quite easily foreseeable, and you wonder, it's not as if it was a surprise that they won the election. They'd been miles ahead in the polls for a very long time indeed. It does look as though the planning wasn't what it should have been, which I think is leading to quite a lot of the problems that they're experiencing now.
And in your experience, just in terms of Keir Starmer, how does he turn this around? How does he get on the front foot? How does he move the political agenda forward? Because they keep changing this. They keep trying to have relaunches, and it hasn't worked.
I think it's all about results, really. It's people feeling that they're better off in their pocket. The cost of living crisis finally being over. There's no sign of that right now. It's about the NHS being improved. It's about people being able to get an appointment with their GP when they want one. That's the things that people will focus on. The things that guys like you and I maybe get interested in, the political minutiae and the gossip and who's up, who's down. I think ordinary people actually are more concerned about what is the government doing for me? Are they making my life better? And unless the government prove that they can do that, then I think they're in for a pretty tough time.
And, of course, not helped by headlines like this one. Corridor care nurses to ease NHS bed crisis. They're now recruiting nurses to look after people in corridors in hospitals. So this is a slew of terrible headlines for Keir Starmer. It remains to be seen whether he can actually turn it around. Kevin, really good to talk to you. Thank you so much for your time this morning. Kevin Schofield, their political editor at Huffington Post UK. Right, we'll take a break. After the break, it's our Future Politics panel. I'm going to be joined by Fariza Balgim-Bavea and also Kieran Mishcook, who is a Reform UK councillor. That's all still to come after this break. This is Weekend Breakfast. Good morning. former Hove Member of Parliament who represented the constituency between 1997 and 2005, was suspended by the Labour Party over these serious allegations. We now have a statement from the police. The police say, "We are aware of footage circulating on social media showing a man in Brighton being detained on suspicion of engaging in sexual communication with a child. Officers can confirm that a local 66-year-old man was arrested on Saturday, January the 11th, and currently remains in custody." We'll bring you more on that story as and when we get it. Lots of messages are coming in. Dan in Kent, one of our regulars. Who cares who is Chancellor? We have 4.5 years of socialism, period. This is Bill in Cheshire, another regular. Good morning to you, Bill. If Reeves wants to stop waste in the public sector, why didn't she insist on efficiency improvements or savings before or as part of the massive public sector pay rises she dished out? It's a really good point, that. Just huge pay rises given to the public sector. 38 billion. The NHS got 25 billion, welfare 1.3 billion, the MOD 2.9 billion. David, one from... this is from someone who says Nigel Farage should take a leaf from Rupert Lowe's book and donate his MP wage to local charities. Could you imagine the publicity that Reform and Farage would get? That's from a Reform member in Barrow in Furness. David, good morning. About MPs having second jobs, this is Laney in Essex. You need to look at this properly. The way this country is being run, being an MP is the second job. Lining their pockets comes first. Keep all of those messages coming in, please. 0344 499 1000. Calls charged at the national rate. You can text the word talk in your message to 87222. You can message us on X at talkTV. You can leave a voice note, a carrier pigeon, whatever you want to do. But get in touch. Right, it's time for the Future Politics panel.
The Future Politics panel.
Well, joining me this morning, two sprightly souls, Fariza Balkin-Bavaya and Kieran Mishchuk. You too. Honestly, you're trying to test me this morning. Thank you so much for coming in, both of you. Fariza, how have you been?
I've been really well. Thank you so much.
Good, and thank you for all your tips as well for Christmas.
Oh my God, did you get to use some of them?
I didn't, but I know other people did.
Oh my God, that's great.
It is great.
Really
so
happy.
very pleased about that. And Kieran, you're sporting a rather splendid tie, which gives the game away as to your political affiliation. Just tell us. We know Fariza. We've had an introduction to Fariza. Tell us a little about yourself.
Well, I'm the youngest councillor in the United Kingdom for Reform UK. I got elected 3 weeks ago Friday.
Congratulations.
Yeah, I'm here.
And how old are you?
I'm 18.
18,
yeah.
The youngest councillor. And so, can I just ask, what drove you to getting involved in local politics?
Well, it's gone back since I was in year 5, actually, when Nigel Farage was on the telly with Brexit and Donald Trump in America, and the conviction with which they spoke. And it really inspired me then, and throughout my teenage life I've just had a fascination with politics, and I've just seen the country decline constantly. Where I live, just rubbish piling up on the streets, antisocial behaviour everywhere. It's growing and growing, it's still growing. And it was last March when I heard Richard Tice speak that I found Reform, and I looked up online and I agreed with pretty much everything on there. And it's got me here.
Very impressive indeed. Talking about the country falling apart, let's start with the front page of the Sunday Times if we can. Corridor care nurses to ease the NHS bed crisis. A hospital is recruiting nurses to work 12-hour shifts in its corridors, caring for sick patients who are waiting for a bed. This is at the Whittington Hospital in Archway, where I used to work, and also where Raj Pasod worked. Essentially, they are posting adverts for registered nurses. This is last week. They are calling them corridor nurses or corridor registered nurses. Professor Nicola Ranger, head of the Royal College of Nursing, said recruiting tired nurses to do extra shifts in corridors is desperate. It shows how normalised this practice has become. It used to be an extraordinary escalation measure. It's now commonplace. There is no scenario in which it constitutes good or safe care. It's unacceptable.
No, I completely agree with you. It's unacceptable. We have the government that keeps failing on focusing on what they should be about, which is providing good, properly functioning public service. I mean, look at NHS. It's falling apart. It needs reform from within. And I think they need to start acknowledging where the money that they're putting it in, where is it going? Because it's definitely not going.
Where do you think it is going?
I don't know. I don't want to make assumptions, but I'm assuming it's not going to the hospitals, and it's not going to the staff. It's not going towards the patients.
I think you make some really good points there about the fact that actually the system is broken. There's a lot of money going in, about 200 billion quid. It is certainly going to the hospitals. It's not going to the clinical staff. And the result of this is actually we're sitting on a system that was designed in a different era. You represent reform. What's the big policy to reform the NHS?
Well, we need to scrap a lot of the bureaucracy that's in the NHS. I mean, it's being run so stupidly. You've got so many people high up getting paid such high wages for not really contributing as much. They don't work as hard as the nurses, the frontline nurses, and they deserve so much more. They really do.
And just in terms of that, so at the moment you give the budget to the hospital, and that is how the money is administered. Is there actually public appetite to change the system? Because it seems to me that the public have changed in their mood towards the NHS. When I was training, it was seen as sacrosanct. You couldn't say anything against the NHS. I get the sense that has changed.
Well, it's certainly changing amongst a lot of the population. You still have got the Labour Party banging on about you can't tamper with the NHS, you can't do that, you can't.
Even though Wes Streeting says he does want to reform it.
Which is quite funny. He uses the word reform.
He does use the word.
Even the Labour Party's crying for reform.
But politically, this is tricky, isn't it? How do you reform this system, which offers carer free at the point of need? You probably didn't hear, but Raj had a really interesting idea where every single person has an allocation of money, say £3,000 a year. You hold on to that money, you accumulate that money. Say if you're a family of 4, that's £12,000 a year, you keep hold of that money. That would then make you think twice about what you put in your mouth, whether you smoke, your risk factors and so on. Is that a way forward, do you think?
I mean, it might be one of the way forward when it comes to NHS and, public health, but I think that what really needs to be done is they've completely pull it apart inside and start thinking about what went wrong throughout the years, because there has to be an anomaly.
We've got an increasingly ageing population with multiple health needs, and therefore you're providing better care, more complicated care, which costs more money.
I get that, but I think they need to talk about the resources and how they're being handled, and I think maybe a lot of the resources are going to places where it's not necessarily needed, like the management of side of things. I think they need to remove a lot of that and put it in the healthcare side of things.
And what do you think is the best way to go about this? Is it to have a referendum on the NHS to say to the public, let's have an inquiry? What is the best way to do it? Because it seems to me if we carry on and muddle through and throw more money at it, when you have a problem, it just becomes an increasingly expensive problem.
Exactly. It's like throwing money on a burning fire. It doesn't do anything. That's what they're doing. We need to we need to properly get the budget that they put in and look at where the money's really
going. What about saying we're only going to give you core services, we're going to provide the X, Y and Z, but everything over and above that you pay for yourself?
I think so. I think that would actually make quite a lot of sense, because it would let's say before the NHS, right, people would find their own ways of curing their illnesses.
They would, but of course life expectancy was terrible.
Yes.
Pre-1948 it was pretty bad, but there again diets were very good because it was post-war. Just in terms of the public appetite, do you think the public would welcome a frank, honest conversation?
100%. I definitely think the public needs to speak out and tell what they want to do with NHS, because I think it should be free and it should be access for all, as it should, but it's just not working properly, and I think that's what we need to focus on the NHS waiting list. I mean, that's a good goal for Keir Starmer to reach if he wants to cut down the waiting list. That's going to be really good, and if he starts doing it, people might have more belief system in the institution if he actually does start keeping his promises.
Well, let's pause for a minute. Fariza and Kieran will remain with me. After the break, we're going to be talking about Lisa Nandy and maybe changing the way that we pay for the BBC. We'll talk about that after this break. This is Weekend Breakfast. Good morning.
who are watching, you know, live streams on YouTube and whatnot. I think it's unfair and it's crazy.
So this is always the counter-argument from the BBC. It was set up at a time which was very different. We had 2 channels or 3 channels, and it's £169.50, the licence fee. Now, the BBC will say that is a very good use of money if you watch the BBC and listen to the services, and actually when you equate that down... I mean, if you look at Sky, for example, it is much more money, but for some reason it's more palatable because the public have opted in to pay for the licence fee. As a young person, the youngest councillor in this country, what would you do?
Scrap it. You've got to scrap the licence fee.
Why?
People shouldn't have to pay the BBC if they're not using it.
Why not?
Because if they're not using it, why pay for a subscription?
But they say they will use it. You'll listen to local radio, you've got BBC News...
Well, a lot of people are turning to talkTV, GB News. We used to always have BBC News on until we found GB News, and we found it was much more reliable.
Or Talk, much more importantly, yeah.
Well, you know, these more honourable news sites, they're talking about stories that the BBC isn't covering. Like
so do you think Lisa Nandy is right in that actually the appetite has changed, the funding model needs to change?
Well, I don't think it should be taxation, because that's forcing almost everyone now to pay for the BBC, more forcing them out of their own... You know, it's basically the same thing.
I mean, it's quite interesting, the parallels with the NHS, because I've worked at the BBC as well, and there are certainly far more people there. It's a much more bloated organisation. When you work in commercial organisations like this one, it is run with far fewer staff, let me tell you, and it's a much leaner ship.
I understand that, and I think there's the complexity when it comes to BBC because it is a national, you know, television centre, and it historically has been amazing. But what they're doing in the recent years, you know, the scandals, and then they keep breaking their own laws when it comes to media and how they, you know, the bias laws and stuff. It's just kind of, what are we paying for?
Just let me ask you this: in terms of young people, what percentage actually do you think watch the BBC?
Maybe 10. 10 to 12.
What do you think?
I was thinking about 10%, yeah.
So you think actually it's served its purpose?
It's done.
OK. Let's move on and talk about the politics and the political situation. Rachel Reeves this morning, and this is front page of many of the papers, the Telegraph as well. Reeves says she will wage a war on waste. Rachel Reeves very much on the back foot. She's been in China. I think she's in desperate trouble, actually. She's now saying, I'm going to break my own fiscal rules. I don't have the headroom that I first thought. The whole thing has been very ill thought through. And now we've got Darren Jones, the Chief Secretary to the Treasury, saying they're going to have challenge panels, i.e. they're going to ask the private sector the best way to actually save money. Well, one would have thought that before you got into power, you would have some idea what you're going to do. What was your thought about the budget that she introduced?
Oh, well, the budget's terrible.
Why?
It's really hurt farmers, really hurt employers. It's really pretty much killed any opportunity for people, young people, to get jobs.
Do you think she realises what she's done?
No, she's Rachel Reeves from accounting. She doesn't know what she's doing. She's now taking policies out of reforms books. That's how desperate they're getting. Like what? Reinvesting and cutting waste.
Which is a reform policy,
yeah.
And so just in terms of that, Rachel Reeves now very much on the front foot. Loads of people, and the copy, essentially what this article says, is things are changing. It is saying that backbench MPs, Labour MPs are warning support for the Chancellor is evaporating amongst her supporters, people calling on her to resign. What would you say to Rachel Reeves if you met her tomorrow?
I would tell her to resign. Because, I mean, look at what she's doing. They managed, her and Keir Starmer, they've managed to completely alienate everyone, no matter what.
I mean, it's quite impressive.
I mean, no matter what, if you're left-wing or right-wing, no matter where you are in a political spectrum, everyone is upset with everything that they do. They flip-flop on what they promise. I mean, Keir Starmer, he was saying how, you know, we're not going to raise taxes, we're going to put more money into people's pockets. How? Like this? This isn't going to work. So I think she needs to leave, either get her act straight and start doing things that people actually do care about.
Would it not be stronger for her to say, look, I realise the outcry over the budget, we got it wrong, that actually the Employers' National Insurance, this is your point, which is the Employers' National national insurance means that actually people are laying off the workers from those companies. Would it be stronger if she turned around and said, I got it wrong, we're going to change what I said in the budget?
100%. I think in a good politician, you need accountability. And if you are accountable and you are real with the people, if you say, this is where we went wrong, I'm sorry, I'm going to fix it, then there is a little bit glimmer of hope that you can fix it, potentially.
Well, you mentioned accountability. Obviously, they need to be accountable, but they also need conviction. If she's going to keep flip-flopping...
That's a brilliant point.
If she's going to keep flip-flopping, there's no confidence in Labour at the moment anyway. I'd say to her, get out, but the one thing holding me back from doing that is if she's the best Labour's got, then who the hell are they going to replace her with?
And that's a very good point. There's an article, I've mentioned it before in The Spectator, saying that actually Keir Starmer is dangerously out of touch. We've talked about the grooming games, we've talked about the budget. Keir Starmer, he's such, in many ways, such a robot, and he comes out with the same responses the whole time. Is he the right man to lead the country?
Of course not. Of course not.
Why not?
He's, well, like you said, and like the paper's saying, he's out of touch. He was saying last year that Rishi Sunak's out of touch, but what he's done in his premiership is utterly
And so if you were the Labour Party, who would you replace him with? And clearly, I think the vultures are circling around him, but who would you replace him with? Is there anyone who is up to the mark?
I wouldn't say so, not at the moment.
Is there anyone that you can think of that should lead the Labour Party?
No, I think they need fresher voices, newer people that actually see what the Labour government, what the centre-left government should be about. This is like completely against everything that they stand for, but they just keep lying and they want us to be okay with it.
OK, we'll pause just for the moment. Freezer and Kieran will remain with me. This is the Future Politics panel. It's Weekend Breakfast.
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
This is Talk. I'm in the middle of a conversation with Fariza Balgin-Bavea and also Kieran Mischuk. I got that right for a change. Let's just talk about this big story which is in The Independent this morning. Young adults about living with their parents. The hotel of mum and dad becomes the busiest it has been for decades. New statistics show the proportion of 25 to 34-year-olds living with their parents has risen by more than a third in just under 2 decades. The share of this age group living at home was almost a fifth, 18% last year, up from 13% in 2006. Men more likely than women to be living at home. At your age, I'd expect you to be living at home.
Yeah.
So how long are you going to live at home?
Well, with my current job, it'll probably take me about 25 years to buy my own house.
Right, and just in terms of that, I mean, how optimistic are you about having independence, being able to get your foot on the property ladder?
Well, hopefully, if reform gets in the next general election, things will be different. But at the current state of things, it's not looking likely.
And what about for you, Fariza?
I mean, I don't live with my parents. I moved here in my teens.
Yeah, well done.
Okay, so I live by myself now,
Right.
which I don't see.
And how tricky has that been for you?
I mean, not necessarily tricky, I think, because I was in boarding school and I was quite busy all the time, so now I'm used to it. I mean, but thank God for, FaceTime and WhatsApp, that we can always stay in touch.
But just in terms of the average young person, getting on the property ladder is nigh on impossible. You have to have multiples of money of your salary to actually get the deposit in the first place. I mean, when I bought my first flat, it was £90,000 in London, and that was deemed to be a lot of money. From your friendship group as well, how confident are they that they can get on the housing ladder?
Not at all.
Not at all?
Not at all. There's very little chance, especially in Sittingbourne where I live. The houses are just skyrocketing.
And what's the answer to that? Build more houses?
Well, it's build more houses, but it's also give younger people more money. Less tax.
Fariza?
Reforms.
Sorry. I think, well, maybe the young people should start working more, and I do understand that we are, as a country, we are in recession watch.
Oh, you're
so
tough,
it is a little bit, well, I mean, it's a tough job market, and I think that people need to work to make money, but I do understand how that could be really hard, which might be why they live with their parents, because it's more cost efficient.
Of course it is, yes.
Yeah.
Well, with the influx of so many low-skilled workers with the uncontrolled migration, it means that low-skilled jobs that young people usually go for, the wages have decreased so much because there's so much supply that the wages just don't make up for it.
OK, let's move on to our final topic, and it's a really important topic. This is Lupa Pizza in Norwich is charging customers £100 for a Hawaiian pizza. Why? The reason is because they disapprove of the combination so strongly. So the average base pizza is £11.70. If you want pineapple on your margarita, they then give you a £100 surcharge. The big question this morning is, should you have pineapple on a pizza?
I don't mind it. I think that if it's
it's a yes or no.
Yes. I think it depends on what kind of pizza it is. If it's an Italian one, then no. If it's some sort of, American style, then why not?
Yeah.
Well, that was easy then. OK, so both of us say, or all three of us, I'm a big fan of pizza, of pineapple on pizza, but there you are, I have no taste. Thank you very much to both of you, to Fariza Balgin-Bavea and also to Kieran Mischuk, who is a Reform UK councillor. That was today's Future Politics panel.
The Future Politics Panel.
So many messages coming in. Peter, good morning to you. I'm now one of a growing group of people who rarely watch any BBC programmes and would be happy to see them have to survive as a commercially led organisation. I resent having to pay for a service I don't watch and a news broadcaster I don't respect. Give me talkTV any day. Thank you, Peter. Very kind. This is Andy. Good morning to you. I only listen to Talk. It's the only channel that calls ineptitude out. Reeves, like the Labour government, is way out of of their depth. There's no one in the Labour Party actually capable of running the country. That's a very pertinent point. By the time the next election comes around, I don't think the country will be salvageable. We're just going backwards. The 1970s is comparable when a national strike took place. I remember the 1970s, and I remember the chaos caused by the national strike and rubbish piling up on the streets and no water and all the rest of it. I agree. I think we're heading in the same direction. Good morning, David, says Sean in Gloucester. I'm not convinced that Rachel Reeves is under any pressure from the Labour Party at all. The rest of the party are incompetent, so incompetent as she is, so they can't see the problems that she has caused. We're going to have a painful few years until we can get these children out and actually get some adults into power. We were talking also about sleep earlier on. This is Sarah near Plymouth. Dr. David, one of the best aids to sleep is proper non-synthetic lab oil or balm on the forehead, on the temples and the back of the neck. I'll try it. Thank you very much. Ian in Stourport. I've been asking this morning also, should MPs have a second job? Ian in Stourport says, if MPs are banned from having a second job, then what's left is a career politician. Just look at the cabinet now, for an example. Absolutely none of them have actually run a business. It's a really strong point. Keep all of your messages coming in. How much pressure do you think Rachel Reeves is now under from her own party? Also, should MPs have a second job? The number 0344 499 1000. You can text the word talk in your message to 87222. Messages on X as well at talkTV. We'll take a break. After the break, I want to talk about the first drug consumption room, which has opened or will open in Glasgow tomorrow. It's a really big story. Also, the use of ketamine, another drug, has reached a record high in young people. We'll talk about that after this break.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
very good morning to you. It's just after 9 o'clock on Sunday, January the 12th. I'm David Bull. This is a weekend breakfast. Very good to see you this morning if you are just joining us, but great news if you have. It's Work Harder Day today. Work harder, a day which is meant to motivate us to push us a little further, whether it's personal goals, professional ambitions or creative projects. Yeah. Listen to that heartbeat. Also, it's Kiss a Ginger Day today, which I'm not sure you can say, but anyway, it's a day to show love and appreciation for redheads around the world. Also, happy birthday to Jeff Bezos. He's the second richest person in the world after Elon Musk. He's a very youthful 61. Happy birthday. Hey! Let's move on to today's fascinating facts.
Today's fascinating facts.
So on this day in 1510, Henry VIII, just 18-year-old at the time, appeared incognito in a jousting tournament at Richmond Park. He was actually applauded for his jousting and then revealed his true identity. On this day in 1954, the Queen opened New Zealand's Parliament, the first time in that country's history that a reigning monarch had so done. And on this day in 1970, the Boeing 747 completed its first transatlantic flight from New York to Heathrow. It's still obviously called by its nickname, the Jumbo Jet, or the Queen of the Skies. It was actually the first ever wide-bodied aircraft ever produced. It had a capacity of passengers of 660. That's in a single-class layout. That was for 37 years until it was overtaken by the rather splendid Airbus A380. It took to the skies. The maximum passenger capacity, an extraordinary 850. And those are today's fascinating facts. Well, a very good morning to you just after 9 o'clock on Sunday, January the 12th. The papers, it's a really interesting day. There isn't kind of one lead story across all of the papers, and so they're all taking rather different takes. The Sunday Telegraph this morning saying Rachel Reeves is to wage war on waste as Labour critics circle. So the government trying to get onto the front foot here, saying Rachel Reeves is waging war on waste. Of course, don't forget she's given the public sector these huge pay increases, but she's under massive pressure because she doesn't have the fiscal headroom that she thought she'd have. It looks like she's going to have a spring budget. Now they seem to be turning to the private sector. They are setting up so-called challenge panels made up of external experts being set up across every department to bring a fresh perspective on whether or not every penny is spent is necessary. There is a much bigger story hidden in this story, which is she is facing enormous pressure from her backbenchers. Apparently, support for the Chancellor is evaporating amongst her most ardent supporters. Some are now privately calling for her to resign. And of course, as we know, the Treasury had to intervene to stabilise financial markets. And the support has evaporated. Even those who first supported her are now wavering. Apparently, when the MPs come together in the various bars in Westminster, the first topic of conversation is Rachel Reeves and how long she can actually survive. It's a very good question. A shocking story in the Sunday Times. I'm not at all surprised by that. Corridor care nurses to ease NHS bed crisis. We know there is a crisis. There is always a crisis of beds in the NHS, particularly at this time of year. But it's very acute because flu came much earlier this year. But this is kind of unbelievable. The Whittington Hospital in Archway, which, let me just tell you, is a challenging place to work, is actually now advertising for corridor RNs. What are they? They are nurses that have to actually minister care to patients in corridors. It's totally unacceptable. And Professor Nicola Ranger, head of the Royal College of Nursing, said recruiting tired nurses to do extra shifts solely in corridors is desperate. It shows how normalised this practice has become. Adrian Boyle, the president of the Royal College of Emergency Medicine, says corridor care was a sign of the total acceptance of failure. They're even putting sockets, power sockets, in the corridors to try and help the nurses to deal with the numbers, the sheer numbers of people that are being treated in corridors. The Mail on Sunday this morning, Musk and Cummings in a plot to sabotage UK politics. Their big story is apparently that Elon Musk tweets are being masterminded by none other than Dominic Cummings. They say that they're being tweeted out in the middle of the day here in the UK, which means that Musk would be asleep, and that Dominic Cummings is the power there since they teamed up and they met each other earlier on in the year. And then the Mirror talks about Nigel Farage. Apparently he's got 8 part-time jobs on top of being a Member of Parliament. He's managed to earn a whopping $571,000 in less than 6 months. He says that is not his true earnings. He works through a company, and that's his riposte to all of that. So 2 questions for you this morning. How much pressure is Rachel Reeves under from her own party? How long has she got? When is she going to resign? And should MPs have second jobs? The number 0344 499 1000. Text the word talk in your message to 87222. You can message us on X as well. I just want to give you the latest from LA as well. There are 4 wildfires currently burning around LA. At least 16 people have now been killed so far. 11 attributed to the Eaton fire, 5 to Palisades fire. 13 others are missing. This is a shocking statistic. Malibu has lost 1/3 of its eastern edge, according to the city's mayor, and the resurgence of winds could complicate efforts to knock back the flames. Excuse me, I was also just looking at people who've lost their homes and trying to get a new home. They are saying that the price gouging, this is where people put up the prices, is going haywire. This one particular couple put in an application at a house that was listed at $17,000 a month, and then were told they had to pay $30,000 a month to get accommodation. Let's move on now. It's time for Sunday Surgery.
Dr. David Bull's Sunday Surgery.
Well, this is a really interesting story. We touched on it some time ago, but I think given that what's going to happen tomorrow, we should revisit it. This is a new centre. The first legal drug consumption room opens tomorrow in Scotland. This is where the clients will come in and they will inject illegally bought heroin or cocaine under medical supervision. This is called the Thistle. It's based in Glasgow's East End. There is a high population of users who take drugs in public. It's been funded by the Scottish Government, and its aim is to reduce overdoses and drug-related harm, as well as making drug use less visible to the community. Now, the changes, they've been trying to do this for a very long time. The drug laws are set in Westminster. They're enforced by the Scottish courts. But the reason it's changed is Scotland's senior prosecutor, the Lord Advocate, has said that users would not be prosecuted for possessing illegal drugs. So the Scottish Government is saying that this is a good initiative, it's a great initiative, it gets drugs off the streets, paraphernalia off the streets, and I suppose in some ways gets those users into an arena where they can access care and trying to get them off the drugs. Well, joining me now is Anne-Marie Ward, CEO of Faces and Voices of Recovery UK, based in Glasgow. A very good morning to you.
Good morning, David. Thank you very much for having me on this morning.
No, absolute pleasure. Now, I think we last spoke in September of last year about drugs generally. Your thoughts on the first legal drug consumption room? I know there's a major problem in Glasgow. The levels of drug misuse or abuse have skyrocketed.
That's right, David. And, you know, you said there that this will be a place where people come to inject drugs that they've brought in, but the heroin assisted treatment programme, which is a free heroin programme, is also in the same building. And you also mentioned that, you know, people will have access to other types of care. And just to make it perfectly clear, that is not true. In Glasgow, we only have 23 rehab beds. So the argument that this service can be a gateway or a doorway into services that can actually help people is it's not true.
OK, and what about the other argument where they say we'd much rather people injected these illegal drugs in a place where we can monitor them, watch them. If they do go into a coma, we can care for them. Crucially, it takes the drugs, the paraphernalia, the needles, which you can see openly in streets in Glasgow. They say it will take this off the streets.
Oh yeah, I mean it will. It will. You know, we're talking about 2.3 million to have to tidy up the drug paraphernalia litter. I mean, bear with me here. Just think about it in terms of imagine a city that's got a £50 million treatment budget to fix its roads. They spend 8.3 million putting up warning signs around the potholes. That's the heroin assisted treatment programme and the drug consumption room. They spend 40 million patching them up temporarily so that cars can drive over them. That's the rest of the methadone maintenance services. But only £1 million actually gets help repairing the roads to make them smooth and safe again. That's what's happening in Glasgow. We've only got £1 million going into actual rehabilitation out of that £50 million treatment budget. So most of the money is being spent in this delusional attempt to manage the problem, not in actually fixing it. And actually a tiny fraction is going to help people recover and rebuild their lives. And just spoke earlier about the nurses who are, being recruited to work in the corridors, And here we are rolling out the red carpet for people to come in and have a so-called safe place to take really, really damaging drugs. And it's been portrayed as compassionate and kind. I don't think there's anything compassionate and kind about a system that does not offer people actual help to get off drugs and spends, many, many times more money on facilitating drug use rather than helping people get clean and sober.
I mean, you're right. It costs an absolute fortune, £7 million over 5 years. They have no idea how many people will use the facility. It's thought about 500 people use intravenous drugs daily in Scotland. What is if this isn't the answer, and I'm not sure it is the answer, but they've modelled it on other countries, something like 100 other countries do have drug consumption rooms. If this isn't the answer, what is the answer?
Well, this is it as well. They're modelling it in other countries where the drug use and the drug deaths are in a very different pattern to the drug deaths. Most people who die in Scotland use alone and they die in their own home. That's why the naloxone programme was also a bit of a publicity stunt for the Scottish government. I think the solution is to offer people genuine compassion and genuine care and rehabilitation. We know in Scotland there are only less than 140 rehab beds for the whole of Scotland that are accessible to people who aren't wealthy. There are a lot of other rehab beds obviously in the private market that people can access if they can pay, really quite extortionate amounts of money, but it's quite simply a case of the rich get rehab and the poor get methadone. And I can assure you, the litmus test for this is if any of these doctors or people in charge of these decisions about where this money is being spent were being asked where their child should go or their loved one should go for treatment, they would not be sending them to the drug consumption room or the methadone programme. They would be sending, the people in decision-making positions here would be sending their loved ones to rehab. And actually, my final point, if you will, is just that, when a doctors get sick, where do they send each other? Do they send each other to drug consumption rooms? Do they send each other to the methadone programme? No, of course they don't. They send each other to rehab, So I would just like to see the same type of care available to, ordinary people.
So in many ways what you're saying is this is the government's attempt to get it off the streets, to get it out of people's vision, rather than solving the problem.
Well, yeah, there's that, and there's also an attempt by the Scottish Government here to look as if they're doing something, and, they're spinning it as if it's progressive and innovative, and they're also telling the people who live in the area, who will of course be badly affected by the inevitable crime rates that happen when these rooms open, that they are being not compassionate towards the drug users.
Can I just pick you up on that? Why do you think the crime rates will spiral when the drug consumption rooms open? Aren't the crime rates already high because people are using on the street and they're stealing to fund their habit?
Well, they are already high, you're right, but they become magnets for more crime, particularly violent crime, prostitution, theft. Businesses in the area suffer. There's, in all the drug consumption rooms that have been opened across the world, that is a very real thing that happens. It's just a fact that happens. So unfortunately, what I think the Scottish Government are doing here is, buying into headlines so as it looks as if they're doing something. And, you mentioned that the Lord Advocate made the decision to open these rooms, and for over a decade, the Scottish Government played political football with this issue, blaming Westminster. And actually what they could, the Lord Advocate could have made this decision 10 years ago. So, there's been a terrible game of political football here, and headline grabbing, blame game politics, if you ask me. And I think that's been incredibly detrimental to the people who are suffering and the people who can't access help.
Is there a worry here, by opening a drug consumption room, that you're almost legitimising the use of intravenous drugs, illegal intravenous drugs? Because the idea here is you bring in your own drugs, you inject them under medical supervision, but essentially you're destigmatising the whole process.
Well, yeah, I mean, and it does legitimise, really dangerous drug use. It also normalises it in the community, and more importantly, it removes, the stigma is there for a reason. Shame is a very common emotion that human beings, feel to prevent themselves from acting it in certain ways. And if we remove that stigma and that shame around drug use, what we're saying is that, at the expense of being non-judgmental, our people are really suffering, and communities are suffering, and families are suffering, just so as we can say that we're being virtuous and non-judgmental. I think it's okay to judge people who are addicted. I was addicted myself many years ago, and I think there was, I broke my own moral code during that time, because that's what addiction does. It takes us to places that, that drives us into places where we do act immorally. And I think that's a conversation that, the good people who think that they're doing the right thing here, that they don't want to recognise that addiction corrupts us of all morality in many cases. So I think there is a bigger discussion to be had here about, trying to save people from harmful behaviours and co-signing harmful behaviours, when actually what people need is access to get back on their feet and to get freedom from dependency. Just to stand by idly and watch someone take drugs isn't virtuous, it's not compassionate, it's not kind. And this is how it's been spun to the people in the local area. They're being made to feel guilty that they're somehow being, stigmatising or prejudiced towards drug users. And, the drug users that will use this facility will often have grown up in that area, so they'll be well known to the community. And the community just wants to see these people get well. They're not stigmatising them, they're not being judgmental. They just genuinely want services that can help people recover rather than co-sign and enable their use.
Just moving on a slight tangent, we have a huge problem with drugs in this country, in Scotland, also in England and in Wales and in Northern Ireland. One of the drugs that seems to have reached a new zenith is ketamine. This is a very cheap drug. It is being used by young people. It's a party drug. The number of adults in England and Wales using the Class B, it's currently Class B, it's trebled in a decade from 117,000 to 299,000. I believe the figure to be far higher than that. And as we know, it's one of the ingredients that was in the cocktail of drugs that Liam Payne took. They are suggesting that actually a review needs to happen so that essentially ketamine, which started as a horse tranquilizer, but it obviously is being used in a party setting, is then recategorised from B to A. I'm not sure that makes any difference at all, because I'm not sure young people look at the classification of drugs and thinks, oh, it's Class A, I won't bother to take it because at the moment I take it as B. It doesn't work like that.
You're absolutely right. And, the ketamine is damaging people far quicker than heroin ever did. The drug, when I was growing up, that most people had access to who were seeking drugs was heroin. But this particular ketamine is so damaging. You know, people are becoming so sick. They're, irreversible damage to their bladders, and you'll know better than me the effects that it has on the body. And again, it's so accessible. And because we've removed the stigma and we've normalised drug use, I think young people, and also we don't have any prevention programs in our schools, they don't understand the real dangers of taking drugs, you know, because we've normalised it to the point where we're co-signing it and enabling it, and we've just become resigned to this fact that, you know, everybody uses drugs and we're all just going to use drugs every way, so we might as well just use them safely. I mean, to me, that is a piece of very good social engineering that's been done over the last 20 years, but there's still time to change it. We can get prevention programs back into our schools. We can socially engineer this to make using drugs shameful again. You know, we did it with seatbelts. We did it with smoking cigarettes. There are ways to tackle this if the political will is there.
Anne-Marie, always good to talk to you. Thank you very much for your time. That's Anne-Marie Ward there, CEO, Faces and Voices of Recovery UK, based in Glasgow. Your thoughts on that, please? What do you think of drug consumption rooms? Are we just enabling people to take drugs? Have we stopped stigmatising people from taking drugs? Or maybe it is the right way to go. I think you can argue it all ways, but obviously the rise of the use of ketamine as well, particularly in young people who are going clubbing, has hit record highs. Clearly the classification of drugs doesn't make any difference. David Nutt, who was the head of the advisory committee on the misuse of drugs, made that point very clearly many, many years ago. What do we do? How do we solve the drug problem in this country? Let me know your thoughts on that. After the break, a bit of a handbrake turn. We're going to be talking about some of the strange and weird stories making the headlines around the world. Stephen Milne, broadcaster, will be joining me, and he's got some choice morsels, let me tell you. That's all still to come. This is Weekend Breakfast. is really world-beating. If you really believe that you are providing programming that no one else can provide, then why don't you open it up as a subscription model to the rest of the world? Good morning. This is Dean in Dagenham, sunny Dagenham. Good morning to you. Good morning, David. The reason the Labour Party don't want to do anything is because this is what they want. They're communists. Keep all of these messages coming in. Brad in Cambridge. We were talking about young people, actually, in the Future Politics panel, getting onto the housing ladder. Good morning, David. If young people can't get onto the housing ladder, maybe they should take the jobs that are there rather than the jobs they want and stop demanding 4-day weeks and working from home. Keep those messages coming in, please. How much pressure is Rachel Reeves actually under from her own party? And should MPs have a second job? 0344 499 1000. Text the word talk in your message to 87222. You can also message us on X at talkTV. But now, let's talk about something rather different. There are some very strange and weird stories, news stories, making the headlines around the world. I couldn't think of anyone better to tell us what they are than Stephen Milne, broadcaster.
Good morning, Doctor.
How are we?
Very good, very fresh and crisp.
Are you?
Well, it's cold.
Oh, yeah, no, it really is
fresh
cold.
And crisp. I love it, though.
Yeah, well, this morning it was very icy when
very
I came
icy.
in at some
-5.
godly hour this morning. You've chosen some fantastic stories.
Lots going on.
Shall we start in Wales?
Starting Wales, yes. Aldi.
Yes.
Yes, that's not there.
No. So do you want to explain this story?
So basically, with Google Maps, you're able to basically pinpoint something that's there if it's and inform people. So maybe there's a station there or petrol station, but a troll or someone otherwise has put that there's an Aldi in Wales, but it's non-existent. So there are thousands of people flocking to an area in Wales where there is no Aldi. There's milk trucks trying to deliver, and there's basically no Aldi there, and it's caused chaos because people are knocking on people's doors going, hello, I'm trying to find the Aldi, please, and it's non-existent.
So someone basically did this as a prank then said there's an Aldi in this Welsh village of Filiog.
Yes.
It's been invaded by bargain hunting shoppers looking for a non-existing Aldi supermarket. So on the map it says Aldi is here. They've all been pitching up, going down village narrow roads.
Trying to find it. A milk truck got stuck, and that's when it caused the biggest problem. And they've been trying to get this taken off Google Maps for a long time, but they didn't really pay much attention. Then Aldi intervened and said, listen, it's not our store. We're not going to put one there. Please remove it. But it makes you think, how quick and easy is it to add?
It's really easy.
It's bad, isn't it, in a way?
I've seen it done. And, of course, lots of memes have come out of that with visitors holding shopping baskets, looking at a sign saying, no Aldi.
No Aldi here.
But it shows how manipulated we are, actually. And, and so if you then... And I do this, where you use Around Me or whatever and say, where's the supermarket? And up the map pops and says it's here.
I've actually gone on to find something, whether it's a petrol station or otherwise, and I've not found it, and it's non-existent. And I'm thinking, well, it says that it's there. You just trust everything on your phone sometimes, don't you, when it comes to these technology and these gadgets?
Far too much. And so Aldi are now trying to get it removed.
They've removed it.
Oh,
so
they
now
have
it's being removed. Yes.
Wow,
So
everyone in Wales can breathe a sigh of relief. This is an awful story about, you know, many of us do things to impress other halves.
Okay.
This chap rather bit off more than he could chew.
I shouldn't laugh, but it's kind of funny. Yes, there's a zookeeper who tried to impress his fiancée or girlfriend, but he got mauled to death. From the lions. He got killed. Basically, he wanted to impress his girlfriend, and he was working at a private enclosure at the zoo. And he basically filmed himself going into the enclosure. He even talked to the lions and called them by their name. He knows who they are. Apparently they're friends. But then during the filming, they found this footage on his phone. He was attacked and killed. And they found him 4 hours later, and the enclosure was open, and they had to kill one of the lions and they had to capture the others. But basically, he wanted to impress his girlfriend, they believe, and that's why he went into the enclosure. And later on, there's been conflicting reports. Apparently, the zoo actually said that they had escaped, the lions had escaped and then attacked him, but it's believed, after doing investigations, that he had let himself in, tried to impress his girlfriend, and was attacked. They've got the footage, and obviously I think there's been some found on X, but there's nothing that shows the actual attack. But yes, he did go in, and he tried to impress his girlfriend somehow by going into the lion's den.
And then they ate him?
They ate him, yeah. They found parts of his body.
Wow.
I mean...
That's a bad idea.
That's not a good idea. I mean... really? I mean, going in to
As
see
you
the
say,
Lions?
We shouldn't laugh.
Well, no, we shouldn't laugh, but like, how many people have gone in to see lions and not been mauled? I mean, I know it does happen, but it's pretty silly.
Yeah, I think there are other ways to impress people.
I think so. Flowers.
There's another interesting story from Florida. This is about a police officer who had a crash. But he had a crash for an unusual reason.
Okay, so this police officer basically had a crash, and he originally said that he was in an accident because he stopped behind a car and the car stopped suddenly and his brakes didn't function properly and he was distracted. They did an investigation and then found that he was on his phone. And he said, yes, I had just finished a phone call with a colleague and I was in a group chat with my colleagues. Speaking to them, I got distracted. And then they did the investigations by looking at his body cam. And they basically checked into his dash cam as well and noticed that he happened to be looking at his cell phone in his right hand, and they had seemed to be looking at an image or a video, not text messages, and he wasn't talking into a chat group. And they basically found that he had been looking at porn.
Right.
Yes.
So he crashed because he was viewing pornography
at his
at the
private
wheel.
phone, and he's as driving in his right hand whilst driving. And basically, he did. And then he did say to them that he was looking at inappropriate pictures. And when asked to clarify what these inappropriate pictures were, the deputy replied in the lines of pornographic material like boobs or whatnot.
Right. Okay. Well, on that note, I think we'll move on. Before the break, though, let's just talk. This is a very serious story, actually, because we often hear about some people at school who are put under undue pressure by teachers who are way too aggressive with their students. And I remember being put through all sorts of sort of physical exertion and exercises at school. This is a very serious story, though.
So it's the same. I remember in high school, you know, if you don't do a certain thing properly, give me 10 push-ups, you know, give it to an hour, trying to get people to be fit and whatnot. But basically, this gentleman's gone too far, and there's some students now suing John Harrell, who is a coach at this school in Texas, for basically punishing them for making mistakes. Now, these mistakes were 23 mistakes that they had done, which equaled 368 push-ups. That's about 6 push-ups a minute. And they had to do these push-ups because of the mistakes, including wrong attire, bad attitude, not hustling, and negative interactions with coaches and peers. It seems to be quite harsh. And it's caused a huge problem because basically is it rhabdomyolysis,
so a breakdown of the muscle, which has huge implications, including so as the muscle breaks down, you then get release of potassium and so on. So you can then get your kidneys involved and then your heart involved. So this is bullying.
But this is bullying. This is a problem that obviously, again, has gone way, way too far, and the parents are not happy, and they're suing, and apparently they've sorted it outside of court, but there was trying to be even hushing the students up. There's been all sorts of problems behind it. But it's serious because there was a lot of people very much that shouldn't have done that and had to go to hospital.
Gosh, that's an absolutely horrific story. Bullying at school. Steve, thank you for the moment. We'll take a break. Steve will continue with weird, strange news from around the world after this short break.
And obviously with drugs they didn't know what was in it. Many of them got very, very ill. So yeah, I heard this morning with Davis in the Tech Rundown the problem in California. Drones can be fabulous, but they can also be problematic for obvious reasons.
Well, I think it's a massive problem for the authorities as well. If you're trying to protect the prisoners and keep them out of, well, keep stuff from getting into those prisons, and of course if you've got a drone you can circumvent.
And they were hospitalised, you know, 5 of them were taken, 35 were reportedly under the influence, 5 taken to hospital.
Gosh. Yes. Let's move to Italy now, because a mayor in Italy has caused something of a consternation.
You're not allowed to be sick.
Right.
So basically, the mayor in Italy has said that you can't be sick or ill or put any pressure on the services. She has said it in a tongue-in-cheek way, but it is with some truth behind it, because basically there is not enough people to help look after the village, because the village is about 1,200 residents and half of the village are over the age of 65. And the nearest emergency hospital is located 30 miles away, and you can only go there via road, which is 18 miles per hour is the speed limit. So she basically said, listen, we haven't got the capacity to look after sick people. So please don't get sick or don't do anything dangerous to get potentially ill or to put yourself in harm.
There's a bit of a difference between please don't get ill to a proclamation banning you from being ill.
Apparently, she said that it was meant to be tongue-in-cheek, but she basically seemed to give everyone the impression that you can't get ill.
Now, I'm very aware that people are having breakfast when you tell us this story, but this is a man who... This is a true story, which I can't quite believe. He was playing the tables at Las Vegas.
That's correct.
Yes.
However, he had...
well, he was doing very well, wasn't he?
Doing very well. He was winning on his machine. I'm not sure exactly what the machine was.
Oh, was it a machine, not a table?
It was...
I think it was a table.
Oh, a table.
Yeah.
Sorry, I do beg your pardon, the table. Sorry, they're saying that it's common practice for people to not leave their machines in the different casinos because they're on a winning streak. And once you walk away, the etiquette is other people can then sit down and take over and you can lose and that kind of thing. Yes, but he was at a table and he had a colostomy bag that was leaking. Yuck.
That's very early.
It was leaking, and apparently because he didn't want to leave the table, people were complaining around him, but he wouldn't leave, and it caused a right problem. And they actually believe he didn't leave, and other people were leaving because he would not leave the table because he was on a winning streak.
Did he win?
Hot streak. He was winning, apparently, but he wouldn't leave.
That's appalling.
Apparently there's been all sorts of situations where people have got into trouble. In Nashville, there was an argument that happened, and someone threw the colostomy bag at the police officers, and they got covered in...
Wow.
Sorry, breakfast time.
Yeah, breakfast time.
I apologise.
This is finally a really funny story, actually. We're always being told by these quangos what to do, you know, like food safety agencies or whoever else. The Belgian Food Safety Authority has come up with some very wise words, haven't they?
Do not eat your Christmas tree. There's basically...
I wasn't planning
Well, I wasn't planning to either, you know, because you pass the salt, pepper and some needles. Basically, in Scandinavia, they've been doing it for a very, very long time. So what they do is they pick the needles from the branches, they immerse it in boiling water, pour it through a sieve, dry them on a clean cloth, and then they can eat them in different ways. They can spruce needle butter with a spread for toast. So apparently it's a thing that can happen. However, the problem, which is pretty obvious as well, is that they said that the problem is they could be covered in fire-retardant material. It could also be something that's been sprayed, and there's no way ensuring that the Christmas tree is in any way safe to eat. So they've now changed on the website to not all Christmas trees are edible to cover themselves.
And of course there's a real difference between naturally occurring trees and those that are farmed, because obviously they're then sprayed with all sorts of things.
And they've grown for decorations and to look good, which doesn't come naturally. Because
I love that. Do not eat your Christmas tree. Fine sage words, Stephen. Thank you very much. You're not here for the next couple of
weeks off, but then I'll be back in February.
Where are you going?
Japan.
Guess what? I'll be here.
You'll be here?
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah,
very
good. Stephen, really good to see you. Thank you very much. That's Stephen Milne there, broadcaster, with some of the strange and weird stories going on around the world. And just remember this morning, do not eat your Christmas tree. Lots of messages coming in. I'm asking this morning, how much pressure do you think Rachel Reeves is actually under from her own party? She's come out fighting this morning. She's talking about this. This is the front page of the Sunday Telegraph. Reeves to wage war on waste as Labour critics circle. This is essentially saying that those people in the Labour Party, particularly backbench MPs, are circling, saying there is no confidence left in the Chancellor. Isn't it interesting how Keir Starmer is so quiet and he keeps trying to reset the agenda and move the political agenda on? I don't think he can do it, but we shall see. And then, obviously, tomorrow is a new week. And the question is whether Rachel Reeves can actually hang on to her job. How long has Rachel Reeves got as Chancellor? Also, this other story, which is the Mirror having a pop at Nigel Farage. 9 jobs, Nigel. Nigel Farage juggles 8 part-time jobs on top of being an MP. Apparently, in the last 6 months, he's managed to earn £571,585 in less than 6 months. According to the Mirror, he flogs tax-free gold bullion, meaning his £91,346 salary as MP for Clacton is his worst paid job. It does make some quite interesting points here. Clacton, and I've been there, is a very poor constituency. People really do struggle, and obviously he's essentially the elected representative to look after those constituents. But when you look at the amount he's paid a lot of money for his talk show on GB News. Apparently he earns £2,494 an hour. He also earns money as a public speaker, which bags him £2,179 an hour. And he also records personalised messages on an app called Cameo. Every single message, apparently, per hour, is £563 an hour. I think I might start doing private messages on, where was this, Cameo. So I'm asking this morning, should MPs have second jobs? Another story that's on the front pages this morning. This is Musk and Cummings in a plot to sabotage UK politics. According to the copy here, Dominic Cummings is helping orchestrate Elon Musk's vitriolic attacks on British politicians. This is including Sir Keir Starmer. This is according to Number 10. Apparently, Dominic Cummings is starting a new party called Startup Party, which he hopes will smash the traditional Westminster system. He's communicating, apparently, with Mr. Musk on WhatsApp. Apparently, the two have become close, and this is the reason that Musk is attacking the current government. And apparently the architect of all of this is Dominic Cummings himself. We've also been talking this morning about the NHS. This is an extraordinary story. The front page of the Sunday Times. This is the Whittington Hospital. Corridor care nurses to ease the NHS beds crisis. So apparently the way to solve the problems of capacity in the NHS, they're now bringing in nurses to look after patients in corridors. They are also installing power sockets and oxygen lines in the corridors. Large numbers of patients needing to be stacked there on trolleys whilst they wait for a bed. Professor Nicola Ranger, head of the Royal College of Nursing, said recruiting tired nurses to do extra shifts in corridors is desperate. It shows how normalised the practice has become. And Adrian Ball, the president of the Royal College of Emergency Medicine, says corridor care was a sign of the total acceptance of failure. So we've been talking about that. Many of you getting in contact about this. Would a way to fix the NHS not be to isolate an individual hospital and fix it from the ground up, then roll out the blueprint out nationally, a piece at a time? That's what a businessman would do to fix the chain. Keep these messages coming in. Mark in Nottingham, good morning to you. Good morning, Dr. David. We are in a very bad place. Drug use is rife, the same with shoplifting, with knife crime, with illegal and legal immigration. It would take generations to turn it around, as everyone 30 or under has been indoctrinated into liberal socialist thinking in the main. Even I, as an ardent reform supporter, am pessimistic about the country's ability to return to a law-abiding and proud nation again. We need real change, not the kind that Labour are offering. If reform can get past voter apathy, then there is a chance to head in the right direction. Great show, and keep up the good work. Thank you very much, Mark. Keep those messages coming in, please. We'll take some of your calls, thoughts and messages after this break. This is Weekend Breakfast. Good morning. Undisclosed serious allegations which he denies. The footage of the arrest has been shared online showing a man wearing a black trench coat and a red cap being held by officers. Police then appeared to take the arrested man's phone and put it inside an evidence bag. Now, Mr. Kaplan was suspended from the Labour Party in May 2024. He's no longer a member. The former Hove MP who represented the constituency between 1997 and 2005 was suspended from the Labour Party, as I said. Now, the police have actually responded. The police spokesperson said, "We are aware of footage circulating on social media showing a man in Brighton being detained on suspicion of engaging in sexual communication with a child. Officers can confirm that a local 66-year-old man was arrested on Saturday, January the 11th and remains in custody." Let's bring you the latest news from Los Angeles. 4 wildfires. They're currently burning around Los Angeles. At least 16 people have been killed so far. And that's 11 attributed to the Eaton fire and 5 to Palisades. 13 others are missing. This is extraordinary. Malibu has lost 1/3 of its eastern edge. The city's mayor has told people, and a resurgence of winds will complicate efforts to knock back the flames. Palisades, which is the largest of those fires, is now spreading east, and it threatens a very wealthy suburb, a neighbourhood called Brentwood. Lots of very famous people live in Brentwood, including Kamala Harris. She has property in Brentwood. Also LeBron James, the basketball star, former California governor Arnold Schwarzenegger, Disney chief executive Bob Iger also lives in Brentwood. Also the rapper, the producer Dr. Dre. When you read more about what they're going through, many people are saying they're being priced out of trying to get another home. This is what they're calling price gouging. They say it's going haywire. So a property that was listed at $17,000 US a month is now being listed at $30,000 US. If you don't stump up that kind of cash, then you won't get anywhere to live. We were also reporting yesterday on these rumours that the fire hydrants were broken. There's a lot of talk about why the water wasn't available, why the fire crews were so hamstrung, and we heard from many people saying that the fire crews were standing by. There was nothing they could do just to get people out of their homes. Well, the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power, the LADWP, says claims that fire hydrants in Pacific Palisades were broken before the fires are misleading and false. The department says it repaired every hydrant needing repairs as reported by LA Fire Department inspectors. They say it's updated a list of all hydrants needing repairs ahead of the fire, and they were all operational. 20% of fire hydrants in the Palisades area, mostly in the higher elevations, lost water pressure due to, this is their comment, unprecedented and extreme demand to fight the wildfire without aerial support. In those water tankers were dispatched to help firefighters, and as we heard yesterday, the firefighters appeared to have run out of water whilst trying to fight those fires. So the latest news, 4 wildfires now currently burning around Los Angeles, 16 people killed so far, 11 attributed to the Eaton fire, 5 to Palisades, 13 are missing, and Malibu has lost 1/3 of its eastern edge, and the winds have picked up once again. So very, very shocking scenes from LA. We'll keep you updated with that. Peter Cardwell is up next. Good morning.
Good morning, David.
I mean, it's absolutely mind-blowing how big these fires are and the area. And when you look at the areas, it's true devastation. And now it's moving to Brentwood. It looks like, actually, the firefighters, they're just powerless.
Well, it's hard to control them, and you have this, I struggle to use the phrase perfect storm, but you've got these winds that are, this is so dry, they're moving them, there's so many different elements to it, certainly. So we'll keep updated on that and keep an eye out for that between now and 1. We're also talking to an independent counsellor, a Muslim independent counsellor in Oldham, who has been calling for an inquiry into the rape gangs himself, alongside another counsellor as well. He's getting some backlash from his own community on that one. Very, very interesting.